All right, my friends, it is day number 2 of the NFL draft. We, of course, come back to you live and in person for rounds 2 and 3. We're obviously going to be keeping our eyes out here at the top. 36 is the pick. The needs are aplenty for the New York Football Giants, as we knew that it would be. Just going to go ahead and flip this little hat off here so we can see my beautiful mug in all of its glory. We're going to go ahead and just work our way through like we did yesterday. I'm going to go ahead, though, and take a little bit of breaks, a couple of breaks in between. So we'll have this one run here right now. We'll get 36. We'll see the pick. We'll break down what it means for the Giants. And then, of course, we'll come right back around at the top of the third round with pick 67 and 81, looming very large for Big Blue once again. But I tell you what, friends, that was a lot. That was a lot yesterday. Me and Andy Makowitz marathon session. So we'll make a decision about maybe we'll leave the feed live and just go ahead and throw up a little bit of something in front so that we don't have to worry about it as they're showing Desmond Ritter waiting for his name to be called here on the second day of draft coverage. They're showing Sam Howell. So they're rolling through all of the quarterbacks. As we know, there's David Ajabo with a massive boot on his left leg. We know that he was dealing with the injury. And then other players, there's Dalvin Cook hanging out with his brother James, waiting to get his name called. Dalvin might be more noticeably invested in this. Both of them, though, showing a calm demeanor as they wait to see when James will officially join the NFL. Hopefully, looking for his name to get called. We've heard the connections to the New York Football Giants. Obviously, we've made it kind of clear as far as how we would stand on that. At least for myself personally, if you're going to have Saquon, you have Matt Breida. I just do not see the need to be going too hard and heavy here at a running back to add value. I know it would alleviate the pressure of what the Giants will have to decide in the offseason, potentially, even though, again, I don't understand why you're going to be looking to go that route necessarily with Saquon in the big contract. But we'll say that for another day. Let's go ahead and just remind you, of course, as we know, it was pick number 5, Kayvon Thibodeau coming in for the Big Blue. We know that top of the draft here, basically everything in the post-draft coverage, post-game coverage, most of the post-draft coverage revolved around the idea that because the decision that the Houston Texans made at 3, going with Stingley, the cornerback out of LSU, that's what opened things up for a lot of teams and opened it up for the New York Football Giants. When the 5th pick comes up, now knowing, as we've heard some people say, Ikwanu obviously ultimately went 6 to the Carolina Panthers. Him being right there, neck and neck with an Evan Neal, it afforded the Giants to say, we can look at the board, see that Thibodeau is there, and feel really good that we're still going to get one of the 2 top offensive linemen at 7. That's what they were able to do, getting Thibodeau, adding him to the defensive side, or Thibodeau. We'll see. 2 now names here with Coach Tibbs and the New York Knicks. And then obviously Evan Neal coming up there at 7, the big boy, mountain of a man, put him on the right side, the bookends. We feel really good about that. One thing I will say, not to take anything away from the excitement of what we already have on this roster, but I do think when you look at the current roster and we say, now you have Andrew Thomas, boom, lock it up. Now you add Evan Neal. Andrew Thomas certainly has shown all the indications that he's going to round himself into form here and continue to be a quality player for the New York Football Giants. And this isn't a caution. It's more just remember, he didn't look great his rookie year. He dealt with some injuries. He dealt with some injuries in year number 2. So it's not the automatic to say that you can set it and forget it. The bookend tackles are set for the New York Football Giants. I do think, for the most part, that you feel really good about where the team is now in the offensive line. You wouldn't hate to see them add another offensive lineman somewhere in here. And we'll go ahead and just talk about a little bit where we think the Giants are going to go here, as only be a handful of picks before they get up here on the clock. How's it going, sir? Or Booth? Let's just go ahead and give you these both here. Nakobe Dean or Booth. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, I know Andy is big on Nakobe Dean. It's funny, and Andy's not going to be able to join us this evening, but we'll get his thoughts on it. It's funny to me that if you're now, by the way, Nakobe Dean was the signal caller for the defense at the college level, so you obviously like those characteristics of him. But the question becomes with a lot of these guys, Why are they falling? Right? Why is this a player that could be available all the way into the second round? Now, inside linebacker, not as valuable as a position as others on the football field, depending on what your needs are. We also know the run on the wide receivers really made a big difference here in the first round as far as where teams went, and then players and talent that were going to be around a little bit longer than necessarily anticipated. But Dean, he's 5'11". Like, he's not a big guy. He has shoulder issues coming out of college already. And again, to say nothing of once they're drafted, they're a New York Football Giant. We love him and we move forward with them. I just we'll talk about this going into Monday once we get the entire draft complete and we kind of break down some of these names. I think what we're gonna do, fingers crossed, tomorrow at some point, they'll probably post it up for Sunday. Will just be a Thibodeau impact on the roster, an Evan Neal impact. We'll get into these picks here at 36, 67, 81, and all the way through the back end. But the only thing that I say is we talked about safety and how we think you can do that a little bit later in the draft, and cornerback still going to be a big need here coming up, which is why I think Booth out of Clemson. I'm a big fan of Kyler Gordon. Some are saying he's more of a slot corner than he's going to be able to play on the outside. But if you think he can play the outside, then you can have the same level of confidence with him. Um, Kobe, a guy like Kyle Hamilton or some of these safeties that I've talked about in Brisker or talking about Lewis Seen, who went there right at the end of the first round. Like, these are guys that you're going to play a little bit in coverage, and they're also going to come down the box in run support. And a guy like Nakobe Dean, like, he's going to be limited in some facets of what he's able to do for you defensively. It doesn't mean that he isn't valuable, but this, I think, is the reason why is someone's getting hoisted into the rafters in a straitjacket. I'm going to guess magician, Las Vegas. So that's exciting. Maybe, I don't know. Let's say Chris Angel. I mean, it's the that's the last musician that I can think of at this stage. All of these guys, like, as you get to second round, there's a different level as far as what they're capable of versus some of the risk reward that you're running with here. So I'm not against it. We're going to talk about the top of the draft and just who we think the Giants could go here, top of the second round, excuse me, and what it could look like moving towards 67 and 81. Is offensive lineman something that you can do here? We saw the Rams having a bit of fun at the Patriots' expense when they took Cole Strange. I think that that's a risk reward there as well. When the New England Patriots take somebody, I think your ears should perk up, as in, hey, highly possible that it turns out to be the case that he's a really good player. The guy got out of the straitjacket, by the way, just in case you're watching along with me. He made it. So we got that going for us here on draft night. They've lowered him down, and they are. They are, in fact, going to let him unhook. They're going to unhook his ankles. They're going to let him. They're going to let him down from there. So the second part of the trick, it wasn't just the glitter encrusted pants that he's wearing. It's also getting out of the straight jacket and being capable of walking away off the stage. So that being the case, as we'll have Commissioner Roger Goodell kick things off here. Let's take a look. Let's think about the top of the board. Cornerback, I think, is there. If you read the tea leaves around this team, safety certainly was one of those positions. Now, Draxton Hill, he's already gone off the board. Petrie, who was going to be a converted cornerback going to safety now. He can also play the nickel. Maybe Andy, I think Andy could be onto something when we talk about Robinson last night. If the Giants like him enough to think that he can play a bit on the outside, maybe that affords you the ability to be a little bit more flexible here. But I want to make sure that we get up best players available and try to think about. I'll go ahead and also throw up, actually, while we're here, let's throw up the list of names that I had mentioned before, coming out of from yesterday's draft, first round heading into the second round. Just had these group of names that I thought would be worth keeping an eye on, and you'll see already, as we know, that there's going to be a name on there that is already gone, and that's going to be Cole Strange. So here they are, right? Ebikidi is going to be there at the top, edge rusher. Jones, the defensive tackle, nose tackle over the top. Now you talk about some other guys. Maybe we're not saying they're going to be here at 36. Is there a trade back opportunity for the Giants? Tariq Woolen, the young cornerback with length and size. I like him a lot. Anderson, the linebacker, who's a bit of a jack of all trades. I like him. We mentioned Alec Pierce, the wide receiver. Nick Cross out of Maryland. These are all guys, Malone, who's also going to be the edge rusher linebacker. That you can do a little bit undersized. There goes Cole Strange right in the middle of our board there. Cook, the other safety, not the running back, but the safety. And then we talked about another cornerback option in Emerson, Wazariki, the edge rusher. Drummond is my big sleeper pick of this draft. And then we get into, of course, Ezeudu, another name to keep your eye on. So um, I understand the need for cornerback. I wonder if the Giants push the pause button here a little bit. It's not that you could learn anything from the first round, knowing that there was only, there was only one name by everybody else's standard except for Houston. There was only one name at the top of the draft from a cornerback perspective. That was going to be Sauce Gardner. He goes to the Jets, obviously, after Stingley went to Houston at 3 overall. After that, it was a wait and see when the next best cornerbacks were going to start to go, which they did. We did see certainly some movement there. And now, I guess the real question becomes what happens ahead of the New York Football Giants. Right now, at pick 33, it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We will see as 10 teams did not pick in the first round, most in the common draft era, by the way, coming out of that first round as well. So many teams with multiple first round picks, so much movement after you got through that first wave near the top of the draft last night. So, best player available on the board as it stands right now is Nakobe Dean, the Georgia inside linebacker. Malik Willis is there. Some little buzz or questions people asking, is this smoke and mirrors for the Giants to be able to get Malik Willis and have him sit behind him? Andy would be disgusted by that, just to depart his thoughts to it. I have a hard time being thrown off by anything that gets said or done here in the second round by the Giants or any team because we don't know. I mean, not officially, right? We all speculate on what these guys can be. We're all excited about what the Giants did at the top of the draft. Those players still have to come in and prove it, right? Andy and I were excited about Andrew Thomas. And then when he first came in, we thought, oh boy, did we make a huge mistake here and really put our franchise back a whole nother season or two or more. He rounds himself into form in year number 2, and we start to feel like we really have something there, even if Dave Gettleman did more harm than good overall for the New York Football Giants. So Malik Willis is there. Andrew Booth Jr., the cornerback, obviously out of Clemson. He's going to be coming into the NFL at 6 foot 194. He's obviously a very good athlete. I'm just reading up some of the extra little notes on him, not to act like I have the entire rundown on every single player. I do wonder about he has playmaking instincts, but from if I remember correctly, and I don't want to confuse him with Kaiir Elam out of Florida, but I thought some of the concerns were just the risk reward. He's an aggressive cornerback, can get beat sometimes going for the big plays. Now, on the one hand, you could say that gives you a little bit of pause. The other side of it would be that's a kind of a Wink Martindale kind of guy, right? The guy that you want to be aggressive, you want him to be out there looking to make the big plays as often as possible. So he's certainly a name that's going to be up there if you're thinking cornerback is a big position of need. That's the other thing too. At the top of the first round, the Giants, we know they need cornerback, and Sauce Gardner's the guy. And if he had been there at 5, I think that would have been the pick for the Giants. If the Jets don't take him, I think it's going to be Sauce Gardner, and then it's going to be the same process. Get the best tackle available at 7 when you come back around. But that doesn't mean that then in the total draft class that they look at cornerback as being, well, if we couldn't get him top of the first, we want him at the top of the second. If not the top of the second, we want him top of the third. That it's always going to be the overriding. Joe Shane spoke a lot about best player available and getting value there. So you certainly have to go down a little bit here. The interesting thing is, among the best talents available, there's a couple of linebackers, as we had said, Ajabo with the injury. Boye Mafa, we think about him as as an edge rusher. I mean, he's a big guy. He's getting listed as outside linebacker at 6'4", 251. Not dissimilar to Ebikidi out of Penn State, another player that I liked. I did ask the question of when you're looking at the defensive side of the ball for the New York Football Giants, we all sit here and say, well, now you've got, Azeez Ojulari, you've added Tibbs, boom, problem solved. What's the next position? I don't think it wholeheartedly takes off the board the idea that you could go and bring in an Ebikidi or bring in a Mafa. Like these are different roles. And the one thing I'll say about Tibbs, as we just welcome everybody in, we say what up to David, who, how about only one of you guys talking at a time? Well, we had some things going on, we had a lot happening. Um, oh, thank you. Well, thank you, David. I really appreciate you coming in. There's only one person talking in here right now. There's just me. So you're only hearing one person. You've officially accomplished it. So your dream has come true, David. Thank you for being a part of the broadcast. The one difference about Tibbs and some of the things I like a lot about him, maybe more so than even the edge rushing that he's going to bring, which we know is going to be crucial. I like that he's a guy, as you watch his highlights, can drop back into space, right? He can fall back into coverage and pick up a wide receiver on a particular look. He can grab that running back out of the backfield. It's not the first thing you're asking him to do, but he's very capable of doing it. They talk about him being able to come off the edge, being able to have him rotate on the inside and put pressure on the quarterback from there as well. So he is a guy that has a lot of versatility. And I wonder if the Giants look at him as being just one of a number of weapons that you could bring in there. So it'll be interesting to see here as Tampa Bay's pick is in, then that one's going to come off the board here and start to set the table. Simeon Rice will be announcing this selection for the Buccaneers. And they will go with Logan Hall, the defensive end out of Houston, will go to the Buccaneers to kick off the second round of action. So if we're talking about where he sat there listed just on ESPN's big board of best remaining available players, you're talking about the 14th best remaining player on the board, 6'6, 283. That's a big boy, right? That's a big body. And we talk about listed here as a defensive end, but as you watch on the draft coverage, defensive tackle is what's going to come to mind here. This is when I mentioned a guy like Awazariki. He gets listed as a defensive end. I think at 319, 320, he becomes a player that you'd be adding in as a rotation, especially in that 3-4 front. So big body goes off the board here quickly as they're showing him with some incredible range, getting out on the edge, pulling down a couple of running backs on the sidelines, really showing a high motor, big physical player. So I listen, any big boys, big bodies on the offense or defensive side or something that I like. It obviously comes in with the idea of do they have the athleticism as you work through further through the draft. Always some of the drawbacks are going to be a little bit tight in the hips, not as fluid as you would like them to be in certain areas of their game. But that's the first player off the board, and we'll continue to wait and see whether it's for the Giants or somewhere else at the top of this remaining board here, these linebackers, inside linebackers like Nakobe Dean, continues to wait for his name to get called. So, best remaining available right now, Mel has Malik Willis up there, followed by Ebikidi, followed by Nakobe Dean, and then David Ajabo coming off that injury. So, Giants with now just a couple more picks between them and the big selection. Christian Watson is still out there. And then we talk about a lot of those quarterbacks that are going to be there as well. I wonder what does happen here around these quarterbacks because there's a handful of teams. You think about Atlanta, you think about the Seattle Seahawks, you think about the Carolina Panthers, all these teams that didn't go for a quarterback in the first round, just the one taking Kenny Pickett to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Everyone just kind of stood pat. That's interesting to see if everyone waits for this board as well and then takes a quarterback where it makes sense for them, or if there's some movement up the board here now, seeing the value of these prospects potentially. And it is going to be the pick is in quickly for the Packers. I got to assume that the Packers are going to be quickly looking to get a wide receiver here to add to Aaron Rodgers' arsenal. They went with obviously the defensive side of the ball. We were surprised by that live on the coverage yesterday. Now you got to assume, is it a like for like when we talk about Christian Watson? You obviously have the size there. He has the speed potential. The only thing I always wonder too about when you're picking here, if like a need like wide receiver matches with a team or any positional need, you also think about where is this franchise, where is this team with their expectations. Christian Watson has been an absolute streamer coming up the board here since the combine, essentially. What were the things that you knocked about his game? And do you have any concerns that the first year could have some growing pains? Something that maybe the Green Bay Packers would look at and say, we don't have a lot of time for growing pains when we want to be winning right now. So let's see as we listen in. They got a great one coming up here with a beautiful golden sombrero. See where the Packers go. Safe to assume, famous last words, that it will not be a situation where the Green Bay Packers are taking, as it's Aaron Jones, fifth round pick by the Packers in 2017, announcing this selection, that they will not be going defense again, though, as we say. Christian Watson it is. So there you go. He's the big name. I mentioned him a number of times. He was one of my guys that I liked coming up to the combine, watched the combine, really thought he was great. He's a player that you could have talked about taking all the way back at 112. And then over the last month, he went from being a guy at 112 to someone that was considered possible to go in the first round. And the difference here being for some of those teams at the back end, like the Kansas City Chiefs as well, it was the idea that there's a little bit of a gap here between those first round talents that went anywhere from 7 to 20, getting those wide receivers off the board, and then someone like Christian Watson. But boy, you talk about a player that it was a rising talent and then going maybe to the perfect spot for him. All these raw skill sets where, what can Aaron Rodgers do? He can take what you are and make it that much better. Outside of Devontae Adams, a lot of talent in the receiving position for the Green Bay Packers over the years, but not elite high level talent as they show some of this high point body control in the air, making the catch, the speed after the catch as well. I mean, listen, this is why you love him. They're even using him as big as he is with that speed, giving him the end around as he goes down the sidelines here, breaks a couple of foot tackles and gets it across the line. So, and listen, he's already basically wearing Green Bay Packers colors. I should throw out there as well, coming out of North Dakota State. So Watson comes off the board. We kind of anticipated that those teams that did not take a wide receiver in the first round were going to look to achieve that goal there. Now, the next pick here by the Titans is going to come in as well. So, third pick of round number 2. They added through free agency Robert Woods, Austin Hooper. So, they bolstered some of their weapons, obviously, on the offensive side. We know the big trade with A.J. Brown yesterday, but the Titans will come off the board here in a hurry. A little bit easier to do the coverage for the New York Football Giants on draft day and draft night when it's the second round, where things start to move a little bit faster, right? So, we'll see where the Titans go here, though. Last 4 picks in the second round for the Packers: Greg Jennings, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, Devontae Adams. Last 4 Packers second round wide receivers. So there you go. And then they go ahead and they take Watson here in this one. So they have a pattern there. They talked about how I think it's 20 drafts where the Packers haven't taken a wide receiver in the first round, but they do some work when it comes to the second round. Tennessee Titans on the board here. Billy White Shoes Johnson will be making the announcement of the selection here in Las Vegas, and we'll see what name comes off the board for the Giants. To this point right now, you'd say as he does it, he breaks out the moves. At this point, you'd say wide receiver, maybe it's a need. I don't know how high you think the Giants should be taking that position particularly. Nothing's happening here at the top that concerns you about getting your target. Whoever the Giants had targeted that was existing right now, as Roger McCreary goes here, the cornerback out of Auburn. So a cornerback comes off the board, but it's going to be Roger McCreary coming off the board to the Tennessee Titans. So I was going to say, no one that you could be targeting has come off the board yet. A position of need had not come off the board yet. But if we go back inside best player available, Christian Watson was the 9th best remaining player there. We said Logan Hall, and this is 17th, coming down the board a little bit. This is about need, system, scheme, fit. That's what you're talking about when you're here at the top of the second round. So a 5'11", 190-pound cornerback in Roger McCreary. I think you view him as playing inside defensively. You like what he does, but if you're the Giants, at least in theory, you think that you want a guy you stick on the outside and can go to work. But we'll confirm or deny what Andy's suspicions were about how the Giants maybe feel about some of the holdovers from the previous regime and if cornerback is a real need there. So we reset the top of this board now again as the pick will be in for the Jets. Picking here now just ahead of the New York Football Giants. We know they had one heck of a first round yesterday. They got themselves the cornerback. They got themselves the wide receiver. They got themselves the edge rusher in Jermaine Johnson. 2 out of the 3 in Gardner and Jermaine Johnson were players that the Giants were talked about connected to, wanting to draft them at the top. And then obviously as Johnson fell, we even, I think, talked about it last night on the coverage. Should the Giants be in that mode as it goes to break here for a minute? Should they be in that mode of considering moving back into the first round to get a guy like that? Or should that have been a part of the discussion? Obviously, once you get Tibbs there at the top, you don't feel like you're going to make a move like that. But what is the process you're working through there? I think the big thing that we mentioned yesterday, and we'll say again, is just that it's really hard to think that the Giants made those picks, which were quality, which were best players available, and also you had to feel comfortable getting 2 players at the top because what the trade options did not apparently seem to be there. Shy of someone being interested maybe in Thibodeau and the Giants being willing to trade down and still get their offensive tackle. But even in those situations, I just didn't seem like there was a lot of real action there. So we'll see who the Jets take, and then it will come down to the New York Football Giants and what they choose to do. If I go back to the board here again, I think a lot of people are screaming Nakobe Dean and the value may be falling for the Giants. Malik Willis, we're still waiting to see where he goes. It's not going to be to the Jets. We know that much. And then Andrew Booth is there. So some people asked about that idea, the running backs that didn't go in the first round, like a Breece Hall. Again, I think it'd be way too high for the Giants to take one just in general, let alone still having Saquon Barkley on the roster. Sky Moore, Andy's wide receiver pick would obviously be an option here. If you're talking from my perspective, I had mentioned Travis Jones before, putting that big body across that front there with them. That would be more the question of, is the value there? Is this a player that is the value there at the top of the second round says, hey, maybe we have other needs here, but this guy is someone we plug in and has a big impact for us. That's a possibility. Um, Again, I mentioned Ebikidi being that 6'2", 250-pound big boy body, a little bit different of a style of player than what you have in Thibodeau. And that it does extend to the idea of just, is this regime 100% sold on Azeez Ojulari, right? I mean, we like what we saw from him. But in the same way that I've talked about some of the players on this roster that you take pause or say, this is for the new regime to make their choice, and whatever they decide, you have to be comfortable with it because this is the new wave, right? We're taking this team in a new direction. A lot of those names, like Kadarius Toney or someone like Saquon Barkley, knowing it's the final year of the contract, or even Daniel Jones, the holdover quarterback, that you look at and you say, is this guy going to be here in another year? Right? Are they going to go that extra mile with him? But another example would be Azeez Ojulari, who we really like as a player and showed flashes of production last year, right? But the Giants just may not envision him being a part of the long-term future underneath Joe Shane and with Wink Martindale. And I'm using him as the example. I really like him. I think he is a part of what they do. But there can be talent on this roster that has already been earmarked in some form or fashion as not going to be here on second contract. We talk about how much we like Xavier McKinney, but I'll use Andy's example of, you can't, overpay or overdraft a position like safety. Well, what's going to happen in 2 more years when he is up for a contract? Are the Giants going to invest that money there, or are they going to take a pause and say, we can go back to the draft and replace them here? Darrelle Revis Island is up here to make the pick for the New York Jets. Almost went and said the Giants here, but the pick coming in the second round for New York. Let's see if they continue their hot streak here. It is Breece Hall. So they go with the Iowa State running back. You hear some people talk. Obviously, Breece Hall is very talented. Maybe a little surprising just from the standpoint of other areas of need, continuing to bolster the defensive side of the ball. But this is also what you talk about when you think that Zach Wilson is going to be the guy, that you think you have him here, or at the very least, we talked about keeping talent on the Giants, right? Andy has always said, well, you need to confirm what you have in Daniel Jones. We're in year number 4 now. You're entering year 2 with Zach Wilson. This is the year where you want to confirm 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is the guy. So you get a top 10 wide receiver. Now you go and you add a really dynamic running back who can do a lot of things. As they show him, you're making one-handed catches downfield as well. So you're adding more weapons. You're bolstering what you have there on the offensive side of the ball. And this is a team that clearly wants to be competitive this year coming up. And they're going to try to do it on the offensive side. Competitive AFC East. We know what the Dolphins are up to in free agency. We know what the Patriots are capable of. And obviously, the Bills are the established top talent there. Yeah, Jets just went there with the running back, and no, we did not pick yet. The pick is in here from the Texans going to 37 here. So hold on, we got to take a look. Trade out already for the New York Giants. The Giants moved back one spot here. Oh, that's compensate. Yeah, so coming up here at 38, pick number 6 here. I just want to confirm if something small happened here. 37 going to Houston. just to recount how it went down. Top of the draft in the second round, it was Hall to the Buccaneers, the edge rusher, Christian Watson, the incredible wide receiver, Houston on the clock now. Their pick is already in. It was McCreary, the cornerback. It was Hall, the running back. And now the Houston Texans are going with Jalen Petrie, the safety out of Baylor. So if you were someone who thought the Giants should be going safety and that was a viable option for them here at the second round, I think you have to look at what the other teams around them are doing. And if it was that big of a need, I think you would have seen a bigger push for the Giants. So another player comes off the board here. Petrie, who played cornerback at college, he's going to come out and then look to profile as a safety, can step down in the box and play a bit of nickel for you as well. Like him, don't love him. Again, these are some of the names that I know are there that I also said I wanted the Giants to stay away from. And you talk about best available, 15th on the board there, as we'll just reload this here as the picks have come off the board frequently. And now on the clock is going to be the Atlanta Falcons. So the Giants continue to shift themselves down here. Falcons are up on the clock, and we'll have to get a sense here in the background because I'm sure they're announcing it live. I can't hear the full audio, so we'll need to see what the Giants are picking up as they're moving around. The Giants have moved down now. The Giants will now be sitting at the 43rd pick here. I'm going to go ahead and get inside their draft picks here and just update where they stand. We know that they obviously took Thibodeau at the top. We know they took Evan Neal. They're now sitting at 11. They're also going to have pick number 3. They have the third pick, in the third round, which would be pick 67. But now they also have 17. They have 7 and 9 in the fourth round. They have 3 and 4 in the fifth round. They also have 30 in the fifth round as well to go along with their sixth round selection. So 3 third round picks now they've added into their collection of players here. So one of the things that we had talked about they didn't do at the top of the draft was adding more assets, getting yourself more draft capital here. And the New York Football Giants have done exactly that. We need to get just a full. I'm going to try to get the numbers pulled up here in a second. Dean or Booth either. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but now they're going to be back down at 43 here instead of picking where the Falcons are now in here at 38. It'll be followed up by Chicago and then Seattle. So one of the scenarios we talked about playing out before our eyes, trading back there from the top of the second round, getting a little bit more draft capital, and then maybe finding yourself the opportunity to plug in multiple holes in this year's draft class. Now, whether or not the Giants start to then come back up the board and target key players in the third and fourth round, we'll have to wait and see. But I'm going to do a little bit of work here in the background as we wait to hear the pick from the Atlanta Falcons, just to clarify the pick totals and spots exactly for the New York Football Giants. All right, let's see what we have here. NFL draft up. Doing a couple of just doing a little bit of working through. Um, Okay, so the Giants traded with the Jets at the 36th pick initially. That got them the 38th and then a fifth round pick at 146. So that was the first move that they made with the Jets. And then they went ahead and made the second trade. We'll see if that one they've yet to update just the full spectrum of. So they picked up 146. They were picking at 147 already in the fifth round. So they'll have back-to-back picks there. So they've gotten an extra fifth round pick to go along with the 2 that they already had. And then they also picked up some additional assets. Atlanta Falcons trade back. Still need to hear what the Atlanta Falcons do here at this spot. And they've got a whole collection of people coming out to make the selection. Be interesting here too when they trade down like this. Some of the things you start to think about when we're talking just about the best player available board right now for the NFL draft. You have to obviously consider the idea that now a couple of different positions can become possible here for the Giants. We talked about offensive linemen, and we saw obviously that Cole Strange went. But a couple of names that I would keep in mind then as we think about the Giants only being another 5 picks away right now, but will Dean make it? Will Booth make it that far? And then you start to look, though, to me, you can at least start to consider. By the way, with the extra assets, you know what? I'll throw one out there that we haven't talked about a lot because we thought later in the draft, but extra capital. Maybe Trey McBride, Colorado State, the tight end, right? This is when you talk about only having but 5 picks in the top 100, having 36, 67, and 81. You want to really prioritize the biggest needs that you have. Now, all of a sudden, with some extra assets, 6'4", 246, we know what he's capable of. If some of his story that they told, it was absolutely phenomenal when they were doing some of the draft coverage coming in last night. So, yeah, there's a real opportunity here for the New York Football Giants to maybe expand themselves out a little bit and have a conversation around extra positional needs that you might not think they were going to be able to get. Now, all of a sudden, they can do that. I'm going to get back over here just to see if I can see what the extra trade was. I also need to update our additional ticker here with what the New York Football Giants will do. So we got to add in at least, we can throw in pick 5, 146. That one's going to come in there for the New York Football Giants. We'll slide that right up top there into the 5th round. And it is Arnold Ebiketie that goes to the Atlanta Falcons. So I like him. I get why the Falcons like him. They went big wide receiver in the 1st round. Here they're going to add some value to the defensive side of the football. Obviously, they're in a bit of a, transitional period here for themselves, you could say. Obviously, trading away Matt Ryan to the Colts. Now in opportunities, they show the highlight, man. Really liked Arnold Ebiketie here a lot. You see him lining up in the stand-up position here off the edge, playing out of a 4-3, but boy, is he quick, powerful, really disruptive force there, and then puts his hand in the dirt and shows you how he can go ahead and just get off quickly. Well, there, that looks more like, as they're showing Wisconsin, that's more operator error on the offensive side of the ball there for Wisconsin, because that did not look like a whole lot of blocking was going on. All right, so that's pick number 38. Still a few to go here on the clock is going to be Chicago. We're going to continue to work our way through the board here and continue to update what else the New York Football Giants accomplished there after making a small trade with the Jets. They, of course, made an additional one in behind it with the Atlanta Falcons, moving them down to 43 here in the 2nd round and managing to get themselves some extra draft capital. Let's take a look to see if they've updated the big board overall. They had not. Okay, so they also picked up 114 in the 4th round in exchange for pick number 38. So they first traded down with the Jets. They got a 5th round pick. Then they trade down again to 43 with Atlanta, and they grab themselves the 114th pick overall in the 4th round. So really nice job here. I mean, this is how, by the way, think about now. I was mentioning Trey McBride there. Cade Otton, quality player. We had someone shout out to us on YouTube. They know him personally. Really excited for his draft night. Now with 112 and 114, you can go ahead and take a tight end here if you like one. It doesn't matter whether you look at him as a blocker in line, where you think he can spread out wide, challenge the defense down the field. We know the Giants added 2 tight ends in free agency, but you're trying to build for the future here. That 2nd pick there is a really nice one for the New York Football Giants to get some flexibility in that 4th round. So we'll have to add yet another banner for ourselves here. This is going to be 4 at 114. You may not actually you don't get to see the fruits of these labors that I'm performing in the background here, but we will give you the sample size in just a second. So as we work our way through, we know, right? I can tell you it was pick 5. There's Thibodeau. It was Evan Neal there at 7. So we're waiting here now as we actually will go ahead and update this one and say, go ahead and update that one, and trade is what came in. Now we're sitting there at round 2, pick 43. So we'll go ahead and keep that up on the board. We'll wait for that new name to come in here before we clear out 2 and 36, and just show you who the player is. And now we know, still sitting at 67, at 81, at 112, at 114, and then 146 and 147. Again, interesting to see as the Chicago Bears pick is in. What do the Giants look to do here? They picked up 2 more assets by making this trade down. So the question now becomes, are they going to then package, maybe, can you package 112 and 114 and move up the board to get one key player? Can you take a look at what you could do with 146 and 147? Any combination here, and then get up the board and look to target one player, or can you stand pat and really just continue to fill out your roster here, right? Because now all of a sudden you did what you thought, key pieces on the offense and defensive side of the ball here. But as it stands, that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 more picks here, 11 in total. They came in with 9. They've increased it now, so it's as if they haven't picked anybody at all yet. They have a lot of needs here. And as you work through the second, third, and then the later rounds, these are also low-cost draft picks that you get to make. Remember, top of the draft, the Giants needed about $12 million roughly in order to be able to sign those 2 rookies. So when they stayed there and weren't able to trade down, big money is going to get spent there. Now the question becomes, how do you continue to fill this out? We'll wait to see who the Bears go with here. Let's go back over to our best available players. Again, a little ways to go before we can consider. Make sure that we do this the right way. Oh, almost darn near cleared myself out of the live stream. And please shout out, man. I know we heard so far what we've heard from everybody in the chat is Nakobe Dean. We've heard people say Andrew Booth, and it looks like, hey, listen, either one of those could still be there for you. So if that's the player that you're after, one of those 2 players, as of this moment, it's still an option for you. Have to see where other teams go here. But right now, after that, with a couple of picks to go, again, maybe Sky Moore. He's sitting out there. That's Andy's guy. Chicago's going to make their announcement right here. Again, I stay away from running back, I think. You're not going to look at an offensive lineman, at least not an offensive tackle right now. Christian Harris, who Andy also mentioned there. George Pickens is still out there, the wide receiver. My boy, Alec Pierce, a little bit further down the list, but still there. Kyler Gordon goes off the board here out of Washington, to the Chicago Bears. So there's one of my guys, one of the names that I liked. Whether or not you think he can definitely play on the outside, that's for you to decide. Here, however, trying to see if Kyler Gordon got the news that he was selected, because he was fairly stoic in his in his reaction to being taken in the second round with the 39th pick overall to the Chicago Bears. As we roll down this list, trying to look and make sure if I'm missing out on someone that I think is worth being up that high. If the Giants are talking safety, again, Jaquan Brisker is one of the names that I like there. 6'1", 200-pounder out of Penn State. I like his combination of size, really consistent player, smart player. Not into Nick Benito. Leo Chenal, certainly inside linebacker, right? He's listed as 67th overall, but where do we stand here? That's 6'3", 250. So if you're talking about linebackers, and I'm trying to, now again, athletes, right? Guys that can serve multiple purposes, like a Nakobe Dean potentially. I get it. But I want some big bodies that also have some quickness and speed to them. I like Leo Chenal, another inside linebacker that's fallen a lot leading up to the draft, or at least at 15 picks or so. That'd be Chad Muma, 6'3", 239 out of Wyoming. Also liked him as well. Think about him more as a run defender first. Think about him as your Blake Martinez replacement, right? So there's some of that there, and I don't want to be misguided in the sense that thinking about how do you replace Sterling Shepard? How do you replace Blake Martinez? Well, you have to take a step back and say this is a different system now, different scheme on both sides of the ball. So it's not necessarily the like for like replacement you're looking for, but it is the production you're looking for. And then 32nd best player available on the board. You're talking about a guy like D'Angelo Malone, really like him, listed as outside linebacker, 6'3", 243. I like him a lot out of Western Kentucky. I like Cam Taylor-Britt, the cornerback out of Nebraska. Again, 5'11", 196, but he plays strong. He definitely has a big physical body there, so we like him as well. Seattle's on the clock at 40 here now. Chicago's thrilled with what they accomplished. They're all applauding themselves in the draft room. Yes. Very good. Hey. As we like to do. We may start doing that at the end of the podcast too. I think there's a world where when Andy and I finish a podcast episode, especially over on YouTube, we'll just go, yeah, all right. I think we really did it, buddy. It was you. It was me. We were all here together. And by the way, it was all of you as well, the viewing audience listening in. Seahawks pick is already in at pick 40, so we still have a couple more to go before we get to the New York Football Giants. But yeah, as I start to go down the list here, and undoubtedly there'll be other guys that they're going to talk about. Some guys that Jordan Renan did mention was Luke Gadecki out of Central Michigan. He mentioned it in the old, oh no, did things go poorly for the Giants at the top and they couldn't get one of their offensive linemen. It didn't pan out that way. But you certainly know that you could still add more to this offensive line. Luke Gadecki, 6'5", 312 out of Central Michigan. Now, whether or not he can kick inside, as we read up on him a little bit, shorter arms for an offensive tackle and quick inside moves can give him problems. So we'll see here. It looks like, yes, saying he could be a decent blocker if you kicked him into guard. I don't like when you're in the second round here, and I'm moving down the list a little bit. He's 72nd overall, but understanding, remember, it's not unlike Cole Strange with the New England Patriots. We were saying maybe at 81 for the Giants. If you like a player and you don't pick until X, at some point you have to say you have a conviction around. I'm not saying that that's the guy in Gadecki, but any of these players that are listed in the mid 50s into the 60s, well, is he going to be there at 67? Are you willing to give two assets to go up and get him, or do you like the player enough to have the conviction to go get him right now? Also, tight end, Greg Dulcich out of UCLA. These aren't guys that I would put. Well, tight end I wouldn't put on the top of the board here for the Giants, but any of the other players that I'm mentioning, like I have no problem if you're looking to go cornerback right now, if that's what you want to address here, and Booth goes before you get up on the board, because I think the value of Booth is obviously there. 27th overall on the NFL draft big board on ESPN. The next one up is Cam Taylor-Britt. So if you have a conviction about Cam Taylor-Britt, you go get him. You don't worry about that he's 71st listed. The next cornerback, by the way, after that, there's only two other ones that I've really talked about a lot. The one is Tyreek Woolen, 81st overall on the big board. If you think comfortably you can go get him at 67, I'm totally fine with that. I'll see you there. But he's been a riser. He's obviously a corner that has the ability to play press, to play zone. He's 6'4", 205. He's relatively new to the position, but I really like him. And you're probably talking about a guy that you're catching on the way up in terms of what his talent is and where he can grow to. Is it coming up all the way into the top of the second round or 43? Maybe, maybe not. Boye Mafa is going to be the pick here for the Seattle Seahawks. The now listed here as a linebacker out of Minnesota. The fans seem generally pleased with that there. So Mafa off the board. But this is what I'm talking about. When you look at where this big board stands right now, Mafa is well down the board here. And it doesn't mean that it's not worth the selection. Boye Mafa, let's see where he fell. So we scroll down here. There's Boye Mafa, and the Seattle Seahawks are going to pick here once again at 41 as well. Let's take a player card for Boye Mafa. We're sitting here talking about at the 40th pick overall, and this is a player that was ranked 38th by ESPN standards, right? So right in line with where you want to take this player. So you like that, certainly. We'll see where Seattle goes with its second consecutive pick. That pick is also in 15 career sacks, which was 9th in Minnesota history. Gives you a sense of where Minnesota is coming from in terms of just the sack records that they're putting out there. Now Seattle's gone Charles Cross. They now picked up Boye Mafa, and now we'll see where they go with the 41st pick of the draft here before we get now just inching ever closer to the New York Football Giants and where they can go. If I throw up now that the Giants have moved down several picks, guys that are no longer there, Ebikidi is gone there, so we know that. We know Strange was already gone. Everybody else, and I wasn't listing these players as being the pick at 36. This was anywhere between 36 and 147, which we can still hold true to, even with the Giants' additional picks. Maybe they can get multiple of these players. So far right now, the only one is Ebikidi. Jones would still be on the board. Woolen would still be on the board. Very interesting to see if Booth continues to fall there. Obviously, we get a real indication about how the Giants felt. Ken Walker, the third Michigan State running back. So second running back comes off the board here in the NFL draft. Seattle picks up maybe a bit of a more proven dynamic commodity. They kind of pieced it together over the last couple of years in Seattle. Now they're going to bring in some real talent. 5'9", 211, Ken Walker the third, considered maybe to be better, a little bit overhaul, but he certainly has a tremendous amount of talent. They're showing the patience that he has as a running back, willing to settle down behind his offensive line, pick his spot, make his adjustment, and get outside. Has great shiftiness in the backfield there. like him, and again, on this isn't the good thing for the Giants is I wasn't looking at a running back here. Another player comes off the board that doesn't really change or impact the way the New York Football Giants are seeing their board. And this is why you trade down if you're the Giants. Let's just go ahead and recap here. When we're talking about the draft and how it's unfolded here since the Giants made their trade back. Okay. So the Giants made that first trade back at the 36th pick with the Jets. They took Hall. Doesn't affect the Giants in any way. Now, the Houston Texans took Petrie. I don't think it affected the way that they looked at the board at all. Some people said they should be going that route. I didn't think it affected them. A guy like Ebikidi goes to the Falcons. Well, they already got Thibodeau. So edge rusher can slide down your priority draft here. Then it's Kyler Gordon. This is why I think, now maybe they like Booth, but when you come down here and you see that you had McCreary go ahead of you to the Titans before your initial pick there at 35, then you also see Petrie, former cornerback, nickel corner, going to play at safety, dual option there. And now you see Gordon. I mean, will I be shocked if they end up taking sorry, it's 42nd pick. The Colts. I thought the Giants made another trade out. Will I be shocked if they go with Booth if he's there? No. But the fact that they were willing to move back here and see cornerbacks come off the board, see players in the secondary come off the board, it has to at least give you a little bit of pause that the Giants are definitely going to be committed to filling that need. It's followed up by Maffa. Again, they've already taken at least one big defensive player for themselves. So he's listed outside linebacker, thinking about him in a little bit of a different vein than Thibodeau, and then Walker there. So you've got the Colts on the clock. The Giants, assuming they stand pat here, will be up next. So they've traded down twice. I've had to reload my perspective here a little bit on the fly, and we'll see what they want to do. I'll check in with Andy on the road and just see if he has any sense of where he thinks the Giants are going to go. He was doing a pretty good job top of the draft, did a pretty good job through the middle of the first round. Things kind of fell apart for him a little bit, and I'll just check in with him to see if he has any. Well, we know where's his gut instinct here. I don't know if he's still out at the golf course. Should have been wrapping up, but spending a nice day with the family. So he'll be back in when we break down the entire draft and what the Giants come away with here. The Indianapolis Colts will trade their pick here. The pick goes to the Vikings. So Colts trade out from 43. The Vikings come back up in. They took Lewis Cine at the back end of the first round after they had traded down with the Detroit Lions. And they have 10 picks remaining here. So Vikings trying to improve their team. Remember, defense, that's been one of the calling cards of the Vikings. Had some stumbles here over the last couple of years. Had 14 one-score games last year. Think about a team that finished 8-9 and almost could have been on the other side of justice, right? Now, there's wins and losses inside of that, but 14 times over the course of a 17-game season that you were in a one-score game, if you're a quality team, you want to be winning 9 or 10 of those one-score games, right? You want to be coming out on the right side. Exciting young teams that are building, they're in those close games, but they always lose them. The better teams, the quality teams, the deep playoff teams, they find ways to win them there. And, in a lot of ways, you're stealing victories when those opportunities come up. All right. So dial it back in here. I was already on my second page. Nakobe Dean remains on the board. Andrew Booth remains on the board for the New York Football Giants if you want them to go that route. Me personally, I'm good with Andrew Booth. I don't necessarily want Nakobe Dean. Doesn't mean that if he isn't selected, I won't love him. Doesn't mean that I don't love that he'll be playing right alongside Azeez Ojulari, right? Familiarity from Georgia, Bulldog connection. So we certainly can be excited about that. Um, I find myself going a little bit further down this list, to say nothing of the fact, just in general, that Malik Willis is still out there, obviously, on the draft board. He's the big, exciting quarterback name, the only maybe really exciting quarterback name that you've heard about. As we see Mel's best board, it's Willis, it's Dean, it's going to be Ojabo there listed as his next best available on the board. I mentioned this yesterday about at the end of the first round, would the Vikings think about, maybe taking him there? We say as Kuiper's is addressing some of the opportunities here: guard, center, tight end, defensive end. He listed Matt Corral, then Sky Moore is the fifth best available. Western Michigan, on the big board for Mel Kiper right now. Pick is in for the Minnesota Vikings. Um, yeah, I find myself going down a little bit further than maybe where the board says right now, which doesn't mean anything one way or the other. Josh Pashal at 6'3", 268 out of Kentucky. Again, someone mentioned this over on YouTube. It's the idea of, oh well, Dexter Lawrence can't kick back inside and play over the nose tackle position at his 350 pounds. He sure can, right? Does Wink Martindale look at him differently inside of his system than the Giants were trying to? Maybe because they had some quality on the inside before they traded it all away, and thought they just want to maximize the value of Dexter Lawrence. So, just from a value standpoint, 52nd overall on the big board is Pashal. Um, and listen, a lot of people talk about if you're thinking about wide receiver potentially, as the Viking pick will be announced right now. John Mechie, third out of Alabama, right? I mean, 5'11", 187. This is, I want to think about him like a little bit in terms of the polished route running, like a Chris Olave, who went early in the first round. We saw. I really like him. Obviously, it's the torn ACL that really hurts his stock a little bit, but that's an injury that doesn't necessarily feel the way that it did 5 years ago. The recovery time is a bit stronger, though probably hurts his stock a little bit just as far as when a team is comfortable taking him. See what the Vikings pick is here. I'm not sure who they have up making the selection. A couple of celebrities, a couple of fans being able to make these picks sometimes. He has a a beautiful purple velvet jacket on. I'll tell him that. I'll tell you that much. So, yeah, if you're thinking wide receiver, I think he'd have to at least be in the conversation around it. Again, 3 Alabama players listed in a row there as the 15th, 16th, and 17th best player available. And John Mechie the third, and Christian Harris, the inside linebacker, and then in Mathis, the defensive tackle. Harris, again, at 6'1", 226, a little bit taller, obviously a little bit leaner, but I like the height a little bit there. So, I like that he's a sideline to sideline guy. Think about him being the signal caller in waiting with Blake Martinez coming off that injury. So maybe that's a pick here at the top end, 56th overall on the NFL big board. The other one too, just to keep names in your mind, as whoever is calling out this pick for the Vikings is taking his sweet, beautiful time. Abraham Lucas out of Washington State. Talked about him at 6'6", 315. He played as a right tackle, and I think we talk about a little bit of he has a short shuttle time, quickest 3-cone time of all, and I think you can profile him potentially to kick inside. Effective zone blocker, short arms. Anytime you hear short arms, you think move inside because the reach, the length, being able to hold off and keep the edge rush on the outside and push them around the outside of the pocket, that can shift the way you look at them at the pro level. So maybe he's somebody else that you could also keep in mind if the Giants are looking to make that pick happen. Something weird happened there as whoever's announcing the pick is just holding off the announcement and pushing away the woman who tried to let him know he could take it. Andrew Booth from Clemson goes here off the board, one pick ahead of the Giants. Again, this is why I said when you trade down like this and you see Petrie and you see Gordon, you just have to think, and this is to what Andy said, maybe cornerback is a little bit further down the list here, and the Giants just have a prospect in mind that they feel comfortable with taking, or maybe they feel comfortable waiting on this much further. Maybe there's a safety they have in mind here that they think is going to be someone that they can use in a couple of different ways. So big names coming off the board here. Andrew Booth, 27th overall on ESPN's big board, so lasted all the way to 42. They're highlighting him here now in some of the footage here. And again, really nice job by him ranging over on this play, helping out on deep coverage, not on his assignment. Eyes in the backfield, does a good job in run support, big physical player from that standpoint. So you like that. Nice instinctual player. Again, I think we're talking about a guy that's going to go for those big plays. And when he gets there, it's great. And when he misses, sometimes there's a risk reward there. So if you're hoping for that to be the selection here, it's not going to be the case. Again, I have to assume that the Giants would have stayed up there at 36 if they were looking cornerback here when you're hearing names come off the board. The Giants are now up and the pick is in. So not only are they up here, they also have made their pick. Um, and that official announcement coming through here. Let's see. Wan'Dale Robinson, Kentucky wide receiver. Okay, so we talked about wide receiver being an option here. I'm going to get down the list and get into the conversation. Had I looked at him before? Yes. Was I aware of him? Yes. But 5'8", 178. Very interesting selection here. They're showing the highlights of this kid. He's lined up in the backfield on this particular one. He's going to go ahead and take that thing and scoot right on through. This is a small, twitchy guy. There's a couple of other receivers. I didn't have him on the board, so I'm not going to act like I did. There's a couple of players like this, though, that you want to get the ball to them out in space. You want them to be able to operate after the catch a lot, though. They're showing some of this great route running, adjusting really well to the ball in the air here as well, lining up, as we said, in the backfield, out of the slot, here taking the bubble screen and then working really in tight quarters, getting himself up the field in a hurry. But I'm scrolling down here to give you the alert on how far down you had to go in order to get to a player like this. So Thibodeau, Neal, and now it's going to be Wan'Dale Robinson at pick number 43 in the second round for the New York Football Giants. And it's going to be the Browns are up on the clock here next. I didn't have a strong sense of how far down on the board you would look to see him. Let's get a look at the player card here for Wan'Dale Robinson. He was listed 80th overall, and I'm fine with that. Ran a 4.40 at the combine, as we said, 5'8", 178. Hand size, who gives a crap? Arms length, not worried about it. But the the thing this is what I'm talking about when you think about these prospects. I'm talking about guys 60 something, 80 something, 91. If you like the player, then you go get them, right? Because I can go back right now and I can tell you about actually, let's just do the quick little read up here on Robinson. He was a transfer from Nebraska, 104 passes for 1,348 yards and 7 touchdowns last season. He also carried the ball 134 times over those 2 years when he was at Nebraska before transferring. Lean frame, easy speed once he gets going, reaches that top gear and gets up to top speed in a flash. So really good in his route tree, shows outstanding acceleration out of his cuts. Obviously, smaller player could struggle against the press, but that's the player we're talking about here. The Texans pick is in as they've made a trade there. But and we talk about here, if you want to just say wide receiver specific traits, the separation skills are above average. The ball skills are above average. The big playability is above average. The competitiveness is listed as below average. Well, that's something, huh? Kafka is going to have his work cut out for him trying to get this kid to really play up to his ability. But what I really want to do here now is they take him. That was an 80th overall by ESPN Big Board. Let's just dial up the wide receiver room. They look right past Andy's selection of Sky Moore. They look past John Mechie III, the 55th overall pick. They look past George Pickens, and it's about fit. Again, it's about fitting your scheme. They look past my boy, Pierce, out of Cincinnati, the 61st ranked wide receiver. Tolbert out of South Alabama, 74th. And then you get down to Calvin Austin III at 76. And yeah, and that was it. So after 76, there were 6 wide receivers considered to be higher than him on the board. If we're talking for like skill set, you're probably only considering maybe Sky Moore at 5'10", right? Smaller wide receiver, quick wide receiver. You're thinking maybe John Mechie III, but there's the concern around the injury. And then you would have considered Calvin Austin III to be in the same vein, 5'1", 170, right? So there's clearly a type they were looking for. And that get you through maybe George Pickens and Alec Pierce and Tolbert. But they went down. They went down several players inside of that position and went with the guy that they really liked. So, man, I tell you what, you're going to push just a little bit of a pause here. I'm going to keep the stream going. Just going to throw up the old graphic and get myself a little bit of a refreshment and just reset my expectations now here. The Giants add a weapon. The one thing we know for sure is that when we talked about the New York Football Giants, we knew that everything was going to be able to be on the table here as far as where need and value was going to go. Surprised to see that the where the value went was obviously going to be at wide receiver this high, maybe. But again, when you looked inside the wide receiver room, what we heard the rumors they want to try to maybe move off of Darius Slayton. Wouldn't be surprised to get that information somewhere here along the way. We know that Sterling Shepard, while yes, he's still on the team, took a significant pay cut to stay here and is not going to be a part of the long-term future. We know Galladay, can he get back to any level of expectation? Maybe. And then let's just leave any of the concerns we had on the side. You have Kadarius Toney, right? So now what you've done is Kadarius Toney's a guy that can be used inside, outside, out of the backfield. He can throw passes, as we saw last year in the limited sample size. That means that you now have another weapon that can be utilized offensively in a number of different ways. So you have to like this pick here for the New York Football Giants. Why? Because he is a New York Football Giant now. And now we turn our attention to if the Giants trade up at all here before they get to 67 in the third round, or if we'll continue to roll our way through, knowing they'll have 2 third rounds as well as 2 fourth and 2 fifth rounds as it currently stands. We will take a little bit of a brief intermission here. Enjoy the beautiful graphics up on the screen. And then we'll come back in, get into the chat, man. How do we feel about the Giants going with wide receiver and maybe one that was not nearly as high up on the board as some of us may have anticipated? Ultimately, another weapon on the offensive side of the ball in the short term for Daniel Jones, in the big picture for any quarterback that comes in here. But you add the offensive tackle, now you add the weapon. We'll be back here in just a little bit talking about the NFL draft, highlighting what could happen next year. And it looks like John Mechie III was the pick for the Houston Texans. So there you go, right? John Mechie III, concerned around the ACL. Listen, if you want to compare two teams here, two franchises, the Giants went with proven commodities, things you feel really solid about. Houston, going back to the first round, went with guys coming off injuries that they feel pretty good about. And maybe they're willing to say, we're not worried about what happens right now in the beginning of this season, but we like where these guys can be in the grand scheme of things. All right. We'll come back in here, as I say, momentarily, keep talking about the draft and prepare ourselves for the third round where the Giants will have 2 picks as of this moment, 67 and 81 as well. All right, so as we say, we move through here with a couple of these last picks came off the board. Pashal just came off the board there. Prior to that, Ajabo finally came off the board to the Baltimore Ravens, which can only mean that he's going to be an incredibly talented defensive player if you get drafted by the Baltimore Ravens. Just the way it works. You go to Baltimore, that means you're going to be a stud. You're going to be a Pro Bowler. Travis Jones on the board still. Winfrey out of Oklahoma. Back-to-back defensive tackles. Mathis defensive tackle. Defensive end. Majahi Sanders as well. Those are Mel Kiper's top available. Best linebackers here. We have Dean and Channing Tindall. That's another good one too. Drake Jackson, Troy Anderson. That's my guy out of Montana State. Tyndall and Anderson would be two names that I really like in the third round when you get to 67. And then you have Brisker and Nick Cross there. So really, a lot of the names that you're seeing there: Cam Taylor-Britt, Tyreek Woolen in terms of best DBs. You have safety and you have cornerback there. Taylor-Britt considered to be a safety. Woolen still being considered as a cornerback, young quarterback, talent quarterback, and a lot of length there for him. Just scratching the surface of how good he can be. Those are names, when you hear those get called out there in this collection of group, now you start to say that for every single position, best available at every position. You can see how that board's going to continue to build out ahead of the New York Football Giants' next pick, as the Commanders pick is in here at pick 47. So we are 20 picks away from the New York Football Giants getting back up on the board there. The question is going to be now, who will be there in 20 selections? And what are the Giants going to look to address next? Obviously, I do believe that you can, as we see, by the way, Sky Moore still on the board there for as a wide receiver group. Let's get our overall board up here. Nakobe Dean remains 19th overall on the big board, and this is Andy said it last night, right? Mel Kiper, the prognostication, everything that these guys do, and it's not to dismiss them, but there's things that you just can't figure out by watching some of this tape, or by, watching the combine and looking at the measurables and thinking about where they fit in. Some things just bring up red flags that teams are going to wait on as far as when they feel comfortable taking a player. And from a Nakobe Dean standpoint, it has to be that he's 5'11". It just has to be the size. One of the biggest concerns being, does he get kind of lost in the wash there, especially against the run? So those are some of the areas that we talk about that we'll keep an eye on. But we also continue to move forward down this board here. Names that you're not thinking. Malik Willis, by the way, still on the board right now, right? So for all the hype around him, is that just the hype machine? Is that just the NFL hype machine of wanting to drum up interest ahead of the draft around quarterbacks, that only one got taken and everyone else is just kind of hanging out waiting? That's certainly an interesting one to consider there. Oh, already the endorsements are rolling in, as we have that was Thibodeau there in the Subway Eat Fresh gold and green jacket there. So already capitalizing. Best available running backs: James Cook, Pierre Strong Jr. Andy mentioned him, liked him a lot, obviously, but the question always becomes, when is the right time to take some positional needs like that? So as I say, if you want to take maybe, as we just check in here to see if Andy came through. Oh, by the way, and he did. Andy's response was, and this is 4 lines. What was ... that pick? So that's how Andy felt about it. Again, you have to, within reason, look at the selections and just say there's a conviction there around that player. Otherwise, if you just go by the board, again, Andy started to fall in love with Sky Moore. Okay, Sky Moore is, 5'10", 195, showed production at Western Michigan. If you're profiling a player that fits your scheme and fits the needs of what you have, well, Sky Moore may only be marginally ahead of a player like Robinson. And that's why when you say, well, this is apples to apples, it's not about ESPN saying that he's the 40th ranked player and you're taking the 80th ranked player. Well, guess what? We're picking at 43. And by the way, every pick that Sky Moore doesn't get selected here, you start to water down what his value is. Not unlike Malik Willis when you see him sitting there at the quarterback position, not unlike Nakobe Dean, right? There's a reason why. Nakobe Dean, people, maybe they want him. We saw Devin Lloyd fall a little bit, but he gets taken before the first round and, closes out. A guy like Nakobe Dean, 19th on the big board, well, there's a reason why we're sitting here at pick 48, 30 picks later, and he still has not been taken, right? So that's the difference that we're talking about here. These things happen for a reason. Now, I don't know how far Sky Moore is going to fall, but every time that he falls below what's considered the consensus ranking for him, you say, well, there has to be reasons in behind that. So by the time he gets selected, maybe it won't look like such a big gap between him and a player like Robinson or any of these other wide receivers that are going to go here. Chicago's obviously up on the board here right now. We just go ahead and give you the update on how things have unfolded since the Giants' last pick. Mechie went there to Houston, and that's probably the biggest comparison right there, right? Mechie was high up on the board. The Giants came up and went with Robinson ahead of him. The injury concern there, obviously right behind it, injury concern, or at least coming off injury, I should say, with the Jabo. He goes to the Ravens, Paschal to the Detroit Lions, and now we wait on what the after Mathis went, the defensive tackle. We saw that big collection of defensive tackles there, possibly. Now it's up to Chicago. And honestly, Chicago would be an interesting one. Wide receiver, maybe. I think could certainly be a possibility here for the Chicago Bears. They'll be followed up by the Saints and the Kansas City Chiefs. Wide receiver for the Chiefs could certainly be a possibility here. And then it's going to be the Eagles, the Steelers, and it will be the Colts there, which was from Vegas through Green Bay. Oh, we got up in the chat here. Hearing Tony was released, just outright cut. Done, off the table, out the door. Anything's possible. Anything's possible, Brian. We're also going to go ahead and just pull up here, get on in the background, make sure that we're trying to cover all of our bases, just as far as there are any news and notes about potentially where the Giants could look to go. Replying here, just on a couple of little information tweets that are floating around out there. We're obviously happy to see them come and go to and fro. It's going to be Jaquan Brisker for the Bears, so they bolster the defense, right? Jaquan Brisker out of Penn State feels like a Chicago Bear. We were talking about him earlier. I said anywhere, even up at 36, if you're in the market for a safety, reasonable place to take him here. So as you move towards 50, a little bit devalued position, as we know, but I think he does a really nice job as they show some of his highlights here on the back end. Yes, high pointing the ball, really rising up with the receiver. And then when they showcase him coming down into the box here, you're going to see navigates through the line, right? Gets in between those levels and really finds a way to get after the ball carrier in a hurry. So things to like about him, certainly. I've loved what I saw from him on tape as they show him there on the outside. Does a nice job ranging coverage as well. So good player, quality player. He comes off the board here. And now we wait to see what the New York Football Giants will continue to have shape in front of them. 20 picks away there. Saints are on the clock now at pick number 49. And as they highlight, the Bears brought in Kyler Gordon. They brought in two guys that I know about, that I was talking about potentially for the New York Football Giants as this second round unfolded. Kyler Gordon and then Jaquan Brisker now. So they've bolstered the defensive side of the ball. They want that to be their stalwart. They have some older players up there in the front seven. Opportunity for them to get younger and an opportunity for them to get better on the defensive side. Let's go ahead and just take a quick look here at the overall big board of where things stand. Right now, keeps remaining Nakobe Dean, probably the most interesting name here from a non-quarterback perspective. And then it has to be Malik Willis, obviously out of Liberty, waiting for his name to get called. But all the other quarterbacks are there. And now what becomes interesting to me is if you think about the quarterback room, everyone said, well, Malik Willis was the one quarterback that maybe. Well, Pickett already went ahead of him. And this is the 21st overall on the big board here. But now the rankings as it stands right now from a quarterback perspective, you've got Malik Willis, you've got Desmond Ritter, Matt Corral, Sam Howell, Carson Strong. This actually, some people say, I know they took obviously Chris Olave in the first round at 11. They came back at 19 with Trevor Penning to help the offensive line. Saints were an interesting one. Speculated in the first round. Would they look at Malik Willis? We know Obviously, they brought back Jameis Winston, but what about a guy that can just develop and learn, right? You want to just sit him down. You have a 2-year deal with Jameis Winston. This could be an interesting spot here potentially for Malik Willis to hear his name called. Um, but it'll be interesting to see if there is any kind of run range on these quarterbacks here. If Malik is really falling closer into everybody, right? And if he is, I said this before. Shout out to the great the entertainer who covers the New York Football Giants. He was saying, the questions around would the Giants possibly take Malik Willis at 36 will all be resolved as this second round gets underway. Now, instead, though, and I just mentioned, I said, listen, if we're going to have a conversation about the Giants maybe taking a quarterback, I come back to the guy that I talked about way back when, and that was Desmond Ritter, because I just like the way he profiles. I think he would fit into the Brian Dable system. But all of these quarterbacks now, there was a 20 selection gap between Malik Willis and Desmond Ritter. Ritter is listed as 43rd best prospect on the board. So could Ritter go before Malik Willis goes? Matt Corral out of Ole Miss at 47 on the big board, right? Sam Howell at 50. Like, you're getting into a range here where Malik Willis could just be sitting and waiting. He could be sitting and waiting to hear his name called for quite some time. So you hate to see this for him. You want to hear his name get called. You want him to be able to celebrate. But listen, sometimes what happens with this is you end up going right where you should in terms of an organization or a system or a coach. Just sometimes these things have a way of working themselves out. So hopefully for Malik Willis, that is the case here. But after that, when we get back on just to the overall board, I'm gonna keep mentioning names here. So we're talking about 67. We're talking about being 20 picks away from the New York Football Giants, a little bit less in the third round when they start up. You can keep Christian Harris on your mind if you're looking to where Andy might be leaning, but I start to talk about, and they already took a wide receiver, so I have to accept that Alec Pierce is probably not an option for the New York Football Giants. Um, but I'm gonna start to look at guys like D'Angelo Malone. I'm going to look at a guy like Tariq Woolen. I really, if he gets there to 67, I think if the Giants are looking to fill that need, you have to be really excited about getting a player like that. I'd be very curious to see the closer that he gets to 67, any chance, whether it's him or another cornerback, that the Giants might move up the board. Just because, again, if you're trying to fill that need, I don't see, and I'll address this in 2 steps here, the secondary as a whole, right? When I look at that board and I see Cam Taylor Britt, who could end up being better at the safety position than at cornerback, okay, maybe. Tariq Woolen's the next guy up on the board. Saints pick is in here at 49. So we're about to be up to the 50th pick, 17 picks away from the Giants. The next ones that come up, though, like a Cor'Dale Flott out of LSU, 6'1", 175. Again, that's lean, right? 175 is a lean 6'1" cornerback. The problem that you're going to worry about with him is getting out muscled. So I don't know if, and by the way, 85th overall on the board, the difference between 81 and 85, and we just saw the Giants take the 80th ranked prospect, at least by this board. I'll take my chances on a 6'4", 205 over a 6'1", 175. Can put on some muscle, but what do you lose maybe in speed or ability to be able to stay downfield when some of these coverages? Marcus Jones is another one that's listed there, 5'8", 174. We know what he can do in the return game, that dual threat that he brings to the table. I can't see that being the case. Maybe the Giants are hanging their hat on what they already have on the roster. The other one listed in between there after LA, but before you get down to Houston, that'd be Zion McCollum, 6'2", 200 pounds out of Sam Houston. So it's back-to-back Houston players. Threw me off a little bit there. He's a guy that maybe profile, tall corner, excellent speed, and really showed up at the combine for them as well. But this is some of the guys at 67. One of those players I could see, certainly. The safety, Alontae Taylor out of Tennessee, goes to the Saints here at the 49th pick. If we flip our attention over to that, because that was going to be the second phase of this here, is who are the safeties that you like? By the way, Taylor, not necessarily listed as high up as some people may have had him there. And let's just punch that up real quick, because just to give this comparison around, now listed as safety there, listed as cornerback here. So you make your choice around where you think he's really going to be. That's going to be the 109th overall prospect. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. When you talk about the wide receiver, when you talk about a cornerback slash safety here, he comes out at 6 foot, just under six, just over 6 foot, really, 199 pounds out of Tennessee. So they like him. They go get him. That's what we're talking about. Even in the second round here, maybe that feels a little bit different than saying at the third round you start to go with guys that you really like, as opposed to just positional value on the board. Interesting to see how the Giants will approach it. They come up on 67, and I think, and I say this with mild conviction, you're going to see them just go for the player here. Now, interestingly enough, we talked about how, what does Joe Shane's board look like? Because he said we want to get best player, want the talent to be there, right? Now, he also had the discussion with Bob Papa and Brian Dable ahead of the draft, saying there's a difference between liking a player at position X or loving a player if you can get them here. If you're going to frame it in that way, seeing Robinson and seeing that he went significantly higher than maybe it was perceived to be, they must have loved him as a prospect to make that kind of conviction. So again, I'm not trying to pump up what Robinson is or is not, but just from a philosophical standpoint, as far as how the Giants were approaching this draft, that's what you have to assume. So likewise, if you look at the safety position now, combined with what we talked about with cornerback, I said Kirby Joseph out of Illinois. He's one guy on the board. I again, um, I like him. I think he has value. The question was, how much did he put on tape? So this would be another player of a ascending talent that maybe hasn't shown you as much as you would like, and you can apply that to different scenarios. Top of the draft where the Giants go with Evan Neal, and you say, well, could they maybe have gone with a Charles Cross? Sure, but there's an unknown component of that there. I mentioned Nick Cross before, out of Maryland, 6'2", 212. I love him. He's a thumper. I think you'd be really happy to be able to get a player like that. I mentioned Brian Cook as well. He's on my short list of names, 6'1", 206. Again, he's 105th overall on the board. After that, if you don't want to bring a safety in too early, which I totally understand, the last name that I started to throw out here a little bit more recently leading up to it, that was Tyson Anderson out of Toledo. He's listed as 154 on the big board. Remember, the Giants now have 112, they have 114, they have 146, they have 147. So they'll have options maybe a little bit later in the draft to pick up a 6'2", 209 pounder that really looked good at the combine, right? Showed off some of that a little bit. His 40-yard time was the second fastest, and his three-cone drill was the second quickest. So you're talking about an athlete. You're talking about a guy that can get used in a few different ways defensively. And if we're inside the Wink Martindale system, that's something that you like. So even though there have been times when I've talked about the big hitters at the safety position, like the Nick Crosses of the world, you can wait. And by the way, Tyson Anderson's right in between two players that Andy and I had already talked about. Verone McKinley III out of Oregon. That was Andy's guy that he liked, called him a football measurable there, like he put up. And then just ahead of Leon O'Neal Jr., the 6'1", 204 safety out of Texas A&M that I was a big fan of. As it stands right now, I would take Tyson Anderson over either one of them. And that's probably like, those are the names that I talk about. If they don't go somewhere earlier with a Cross, Cook, I like just waiting, get me back to 147 and see. Maybe any of those three players that are there you'd be comfortable with. McKinley listed at 120 overall on the board. So maybe you're talking more 114 for him potentially, depending on where players want to go. Yeah, any QBs? And what did you miss? You missed them taking Robinson, the wide receiver, arguably 40 positions over his overall big board rank. That's what you missed out on. But no QBs had been taken yet to this point. And the Giants traded back a couple of times. I don't know how much you missed out. And that's, what? It's a good reminder to let everybody know that what the Giants did at the top of the second round was trade back with the New York Jets. They made a small trade, and then they made a slightly bigger one, went back one spot or two spots. Then they went back all the way to 43 with Atlanta. And in doing so, they gave themselves the 43rd pick in the second round, with which they took Robinson, the speedy little zippy wide receiver weapon, there at 43. And they're now set up for 67 and 81 in the third round. And that'll wrap up today's draft coverage. And then tomorrow, starting at noon, they'll be talking about 112, 114, and then also 146 and 147. They picked up an extra fourth rounder with Atlanta. They picked up an extra fifth rounder from the Jets, and that'll go along with their two sixth rounders, 173 and 182. So that's currently where they stand. So they did have some movement at the top of the board for themselves in the second round. They picked up a couple of extra assets. They increased what could be their draft haul from 9 to 11 overall. And we'll just have to wait and see, as we're now pick 50 is in for the New England Patriots. We saw Taylor, the cornerback, going to play safety out of Tennessee, get taken there by the New Orleans Saints. And now the Patriots, who will have a special guest announcer, Ben Lepper, out of Massachusetts. He's sporting the Patriots jersey, and he's going to make the big announcement here momentarily. So he'll make the Patriots announcement at 50. We'll be 17 away from the New York Football Giants being back on the board. And again, just trying to figure out what's the next area of need. So what I will say is, can't take any credit for seeing a wide receiver that you frankly did not think was going to be up on the board there for the Giants. But when Wan'Dale Robinson goes, it does clarify or crystallize the idea of this is a priority for the New York Football Giants. The wide receiver room was going to be a priority for them, and they went ahead and addressed it very early, right? They made this their third most important position. And you can argue, and you can actually make that statement with some level of conviction on the sense of this is a player, and this is going to be Tyquan Thornton out of Baylor, the wide receiver. This is Andy's. Andy liked Tyquan Thornton. So he had mentioned him, I think, in our last preview of the draft, a guy to think about. I think he was talking about him at 67 again. So goes up at 50 here. You were hoping that maybe he's a player that would fall to you. Notice he's a 67, maybe he said 81, but he was a rising name. This guy was really coming up out of Baylor. You understand why when you see it. He marked him down as being a like-for-like replacement for Darius Slayton. Now, depending on how you feel about Darius Slayton, that could be an insult. But ultimately, he's going to go here at 50. So the Patriots have taken multiple players far ahead of where you think they should have or could have gone. So that's, again, just the reality that we're talking about here with the New York Football Giants. They have conviction around players. They're making their decisions, and they're sticking to them. So, again, we won't know anything about these guys until they're in camp, until we see how they look and how they perform on the field in training camp, in preseason, and then ultimately as we get to the regular season here, right? And by the way, Patriots, I think, have limited picks in this draft, if I'm not mistaken. They've only taken Cole Strange and Thornton. So also, depending on how many picks you have, as the Eagles pick is quickly in for them, we'll see what the division opponent does. You want to be deliberate, right? You're not going to pick again until 50 in the second round. We don't know if Cole Strange is going to be there. Probably a good chance that he was. But guess what? We like him, so we're taking him. And then you come up in the second round, the 29th pick, you think, you know what? We're taking him. We're not risking something else happening here that's going to get in our way. So we'll see where Philadelphia goes here. Obviously, directly impacts the New York Football Giants. You see on the ticker down below, highlights who they've taken so far, the New York Football Giants, and then updating those pick selections that they have in ahead of them. All right, let's go ahead and just reset things really quick here. Highlight who just got drafted there. The Eagles pick is going to be in. And then we're going to take just a little bit of a brief intermission here because we have just a handful to go before we're out of the second round. And then we'll come back in at the top of the third just to keep an eye out because we're not sure. Obviously, a big opportunity here for some movement to happen and teams to come up. Third best, by the way, third best cornerback on the board right now is Tyreek Woolen. Just to put that out there for you. I would like to see a player like that. So just very quickly here, let's reset this board. We know that it was Thornton went last there to the Patriots. The Philadelphia Eagles are now there in the wings. They have their pick in, so we'll see who they take before we push the pause button. And we still have, obviously, another 9, 10 picks to go here in the second round. It's going to move on into the Kansas City Chiefs, so they got from New England. Then the Cardinals, the Cowboys, the Bills, the Falcons, and the Minnesota Vikings. And this round will close out with the Denver Broncos. But before they go, it'll be after the Vikings, the Buccaneers, the 49ers, the Chiefs again, and then the Bengals. Okay. So that's what we'll be waiting on. But the other thing that we're waiting on is, where do we see this board? And actually, I'll be honest with you. Who's going to declare that the value of Nakobe Dean is worth it now at pick 51? He is now 19th overall coming into the draft. Obviously taking a big tumble along with Malik Willis. At this point now, Sky Moore is starting to fall here a bit. I was not a big fan of his. And again, profiles in similar ways as far as how you're going to utilize him, but he didn't blow me away on film. So that's why I never mentioned him as being an option. It's why I went to a guy like Alec Pierce and just said, just in the wide receiver class overall, these are guys I look past, and then I pull out the names that I think could be good. Travis Jones remains out there right now. He was 42nd overall on the board, right? So is there an opportunity maybe there for some team, if not the Giants, just to see value? But if we go down a little ways, you know what? Frankly, Trey McBride, right? He's starting to get into tight end's going to get diminished a little bit from a positional value, but he's starting to approach the range where you wonder when is his name going to get called here. After that, though, I keep coming back to it. Listen, you can talk about, guys like Drake Jackson out of USC. I'm okay with him. Christian Harris, we mentioned him before, but we're really in this point now of I keep coming back to it. Guys that I've looked at and liked. The first guys that I really start to think about having conviction around are players like Leo Chenal out of Wisconsin. He's 67th on the board. Muma, who fell a little bit, 68th on the board. And then I mentioned Taylor Britt, D'Angelo Malone, 70th overall on the board. So these are all names, and those guys all being in the linebacker, outside, inside linebacker position. That certainly, if not all of them, one of them should be there for you. And as we rotate over through, then I think from 67 to 81, you can think about some of those safety names that we mentioned. If we're staying away from the idea of any wide receiver anytime soon, though I still keep Ontario Drummond in my back pocket for day number 3. Why not, though? How about a different reunion of two Georgia Bulldogs in Channing Tindall, right? 6'2", 230. Like, this is a guy that I really like, right? Nakobe Dean, 5'11", 229. No, I want the guy that's a little bit bigger. The weight's not necessarily there, but that length matters for you. That's how you get off and push through some of those lines, push through some of the offensive tackles. It's the way you get out on in coverage, with running backs coming out of the backfield. You need that bit of height and length to really be a player that can have an impact. Now, he didn't have a lot of opportunities that some of the players there had at Georgia, but it's a deep defensive class coming out of that college alone. So he's somebody that I certainly keep an eye on. At 67, I like him. At 81, I love him probably. And then we mentioned Woolen there before. James Cook, the running back, at some point, it's obviously going to be a topic of conversation. And then, Awazariki, by the way, I'm gonna say this right now because I'm just seeing where he is currently ranked. Cameron Jurgens, the center, went here to the Philadelphia Eagles. So you understand what they did there, trying to beef up that offensive line. So they got Davis in the first round. They stay in the trenches. Davis in the first round defensively, big boy disruption, and then Cam Jurgens. So they're trying to get themselves solid on both sides of the ball there. Awazariki, who I talked about saying this is a guy I was taking in mock drafts at 173. He is 90th overall on this board right now. He is 6'6". He is 316 pounds. He has the kind of look and length of a of a Leonard Williams. I think that if you got a player like this, you could talk about pushing Dexter Lawrence right back over to the nose tackle, and then have Leonard Williams and Awazariki, and then you have Azeez Ojulari, and you have Thibodeau. Like, I love this package, and I love this kid's name. The Steelers pick is already quickly in here at 52. So I really like the fact that I'm seeing him up on the board here a bit more, because it means that as George Pickens will go to the Steelers. So George Pickens goes here out of Georgia, and that will give Kenny Pickett and Pickens. That's a good combination to have a conversation around when you're covering the Pittsburgh Steelers. That goes here at 52. But Awazariki, the fact that I'm seeing him this high up on the overall board really gets me excited to have some conviction around the way I was thinking about him coming into this draft. And he is closely followed behind, just 2 players lower, Troy Anderson, 6'4", 243. So if I'm talking about players that I like for the New York Football Giants at 67 and at 81, You can take any number of these guys here. And this is, again, 92nd overall. I'm fine if you want to take him at 67. And by the way, he's a rising name. So taking him at 67, you'd be getting probably closer to accurate value than back at what his current rank was, 92 coming in. Troy Anderson, inside linebacker, Montana State. Wazariki, Iowa State, defensive end. That's what pushes Dexter Lawrence back in to the interior there over the nose tackle. Really beefs up what you can do there. Tyreek Woolen, the cornerback. Tyndall, the inside linebacker. And then, as we said, one of those maybe those safeties there. I'll hold off on that one a little bit deeper down. So those 4 players right there, I'll go ahead and fire them up here on the board. I'm going to take a brief step away as the Colts pick is in right now, just to give myself a light breather. Yeah, and then so it's those 4 players there, and the only other ones that I really have a conviction around or think would be exciting, it's Alec Pierce to Cincinnati. So we talked about it. They need that weapon. I totally get this with Matt Ryan there now. You want a weapon, you get a weapon here. Alec Pierce, wide receiver, Cincinnati, lean, speed, 6'3", 211. Really liked him. Taken 53rd, listed as 61 on the board. That's a great meeting of value and need there. So you have to absolutely love that. Comparison is Jordy Nelson. I really like this kid. I think that he does a great job downfield, has that speed to get over the top, tracks the ball really well in the air. This is a guy that I looked at a ton and really liked him. So he goes off the board here. And then I'll throw in Leo Chenal would be another name. D'Angelo Malone, obviously there. So 5, 6 names here that I'm highlighting that, and and some of these guys are going to be gone by the time we get there at 67. But there's 6 names here, 7 maybe, that I would say you're getting real quality players here for the New York Football Giants. So I'm going to go ahead and punch that up across the ticker here, just so we have it up. I'll try to get myself a 5 or 7 minute pause here. The pick is in for the Chiefs. This thing's happening kind of quick, so the second round's going to come to an end in a hurry, and I won't have much of a turnaround time here. But I'm going to get these names up just so you have them in front of you. So I have the receipts on it, by the way, and then we will see what the results end up being here for the New York Football Giants. They are now 13 picks away from being back on the board at 67. Oh, it's happening. It's happening in a hurry for us, friends. As they say on draft night, everyone's a winner, right? Everything is going exactly according to plan. You're getting every single player that you ever dreamed on. And hopefully, listen, to be honest with you, this is one of those times where, outside of division opponents, maybe for the most part, I want I want everyone, every fan base to feel great. I want every fan base to feel like they did it, right? I don't want a fan base to feel like Houston when they stake Stingley and everyone's screaming that no one in their right mind would have taken him. Somebody would take him until the second round when you're hearing ESPN former GMs talk about players. Like that's not any fun for a fan base on draft night when they're just like trying to have a dream about what could be. And you have someone say, well, it's not going to be this year, friends. And there's a chance that this guy is a disaster or here's a real bust, right? I don't want Malik Willis to be sitting there waiting to hear his name called this deep into the second round or any of these other quarterbacks for that matter, right? We're closing in on the end of the second round, and we have not heard any one of these quarterbacks get named after Pickett's went. So it's just, that's a disappointing part of it. So I do want everyone to feel like they're winning the the draft sweepstakes, and it all comes out in the wash on the back end, as we know. I'm going to keep some names off like Nick Cross. I'm going to try to stick to my guns here around saying they can wait a little bit and still find some value at a later point in this draft class. So I'm only going to go with guys that I really have had a conviction around before, names that have jumped out to me. We're covering everything from inside and outside linebacker here. Those are some of the first names that are getting mentioned. Tyndall, as I said before. But then the guy at 67, if we're talking about positional value, I think it's easy to maybe pull the trigger quickly on a cornerback that you like. Because after you get through this, I'm sure there's going to be prospects that people will point out, and I'd be excited about once I went and studied them and watched them a little bit on tape. But once you get past 67, I think the value of some of these guys and these names that you would hear, it's going to start to get a little bit watered down for me, where I probably after 67 might say at that point, you don't need to, you can tell me you don't take one until the back end of the draft, or you wait for an undrafted free agent, or you wait for cuts, or what happens with James Bradbury and on down the line. So there is a cutoff point here. The same way that I don't want to take a tight end too early in the draft, I don't want to take a cornerback too late because at a certain point, you feel like maybe you're just kind of throwing a dart at the board when you'd rather say, hey, late round, tight end, because of the diminished value of that position, I can still get a starter there, though, right? Cornerback, I could be talking about a guy that's going to come into camp and see how it works out and whether or not he makes it through, and then maybe could be a contributor in some capacity. So again, that's really what I'm looking for here at 67 and 81. Third round, I still want guys that if I think I can find a starter, that's what I'm after. Oh, and by the way, it didn't actually let me just throw in. I didn't include Parham in this, the 6'3", 311 guard out of Memphis. Probably want to kick him into center. That's one guy that if you want to improve the offensive line, certainly he's been someone that we talked about a lot, and it'll be interesting to see. Waiting for that Chiefs pick to come through here. These are just names. The offensive line, we haven't really seen a lot of those names now, right? Top of the draft where the Giants were. You saw the random Cole Strange for the Patriots, but they saw a player that they liked, and now you're kind of waiting on some of these other guys. And Strange would have been in and around where Parham was. They had him a little bit behind him. I kind of liked him even a little bit more, maybe. But you're seeing how that goes. Tony Gonzalez is going to shout out the pick here for the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, another guy was Velus Jones Jr. out of Tennessee. Well, that was like kind of in the vein of Robinson, the way they took him. Sky Moore finally gets his name called. So 14 picks after, his range. So they feel like that's a nice one. Take the top off. You're Kansas City. You're looking for the value. You're looking to replace Tyreek Hill, right? Go get yourself a guy that can pop the top off, do a lot of dynamic things for your offense out of Western Michigan there. So good for them. That's Andy's pick, so he'll keep an eye on him as he develops. Obviously, all of his stats will be through the roof because he's going to be playing with Patrick Mahomes. And then the last one I'm throwing in here as well as I put this list together is going to be Martin Emerson. I've mentioned him before, Mississippi State product 6'2", 201. You can tell me where you think. If at 67 it's worth it or not, or maybe it's at 81 if you don't get Woolen. That's another name that you could certainly think has the length and the size. He was recruited as a safety, played as a cornerback. They said he could have gone in the upper portion of the second round if he played and wanted to play at safety. It looks like he wants to stay at cornerback, and therefore his value is dropping a little bit. But if you're the Giants, maybe you get the sneaky bonus value of a guy of, hey, you want to come in? We'll give you full run at corner. And inside of Wink Martindale's system, maybe you'll also be the big safety on the backside here when we need you to. So a little bit of dual value from him that I want to make sure that we track through here as well. Okay, so as I said, and now he's listed 112 overall on the board. So when I put these names up, Chenault, Malone, Tyndall, those are inside-outside linebackers. Woolen, the cornerback. You're talking about Awazariki, the defensive end. Anderson, linebacker. Parham, offensive line. And then Emerson there. Again, another cornerback to consider. So those are kind of the names there. How high up any of these guys could be taken, I'm not going to mince words about it. You can even throw in Neil Farrell Jr. out of LSU, the defensive tackle as well, if you wanted to. I can add him to that list. He's 118, but 81 wouldn't be too high. So these are guys that I'm at least. And there goes Trey McBride. So good for the Cardinals. Trey McBride, Colorado State. Here's his name called. Probably the one big tight end name you expect to hear here in the second round. Wouldn't expect to see another one get called until some point in the third round. So good for him that he hears his name get announced there in Vegas. And I'm just going to throw this last one up. I feel like I'm just kind of rambling out a lot of these names here. But go ahead and put Farrell Jr. just up on the board. So we have that there for prosperity. Oh, our end of the day? No, not just yet. Not end of the day just yet. So now we're up to what? 2, 4, 6, 8. That's the 9th player that I could put on the board there for you. Yeah. These are the guys that I'm thinking about. These are the areas that I think the Giants could find real value at 67 and at 81. And if they have conviction around any of these players, you can even make the case to go ahead and package up, right? Grab 114 or 112 and move yourself up the board and make sure you get a guy that you covet, or stand pat and give yourself more needs, fill more holes on this roster. All right, we'll go ahead and take a little bit of an intermission here. We'll get the graphics up on the board, and I'll come back in as the Cowboys pick is in. So we'll check in where they go here at 56, and then we'll come back around as the third round kicks off here just tentatively, we'll say I'll be back up a little bit after 9 o'clock, maybe 9:10. We'll come back on here and I'll make sure to punch that up there as well. Go get yourselves a snack, have a beverage. We'll come back in and talk New York football Giants as we close in on the end of the second round, looking ahead to that third round and where Joe Shane and Big Blue will look to bolster this roster heading into the 2022 season. Good Lord. Hey, John, thank you. Soundboard off of mute. Streaming not off of mute. Thank God you were here. Okay. Let's recap. That was a dry run for me. Shout out to you, John Hawthorne. I really appreciate it. I would have gone on talking about the depth chart, which no one would know that I was speaking to because I was on mute. Okay. So quickly, let's just highlight very briefly here what happened leading up to this point as we're closing out. Just had a trade. Cincinnati came up with the Buffalo Bills to the second round, pick number 60 overall there. And that pick is in. We're waiting to hear it. But ahead of it, some guys that came off the board that I really liked. That was Alec Pierce. He went there along with Sky Moore. Had a little bit of a mini run there, going back to that the Colts with the wide receiver out of Cincinnati in Alec Pierce at 53. We saw Sky Moore go there to the Kansas City Chiefs. And then Gadecki, offensive tackle. He goes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. My guy, linebacker, Swiss Army knife, Troy Anderson, off the board at 58 to the Atlanta Falcons. Then Ingram goes, and now Cincinnati is on the board. So we did our due diligence there. Now, from a depth chart standpoint for the New York Football Giants, let's see. Did they do the right thing and put so Wan'Dale Robinson? Here's what's interesting about that selection in the second round. As we've said before, if you're taking guys, I want starters in the first round, especially at the top of it. In the second round, I want starters to be on the board there. They list him right now behind Sterling Shepard, but that's how you can maybe think about this as far as the depth chart goes. It's Kenny Golladay with Darius Slayton behind him. Cam Taylor-Britt, mentioned him, listed as cornerback here. Maybe he's safety in between there. So one of the names I didn't put up on my list because I didn't think he would be there. He won't be there. He goes here 60th to the Cincinnati Bengals. Two-time second team All Big Ten selection. Okay. Kenny Golladay with Darius Slayton behind him. Sterling Shepard with Wan'Dale Robinson behind him. And then Kadarius Toney with Richie James, who they brought in this off season. Ricky Seals-Jones ahead of Akins there at the tight end position. So that's where we stand. I'm going to pull up as well in addition here, as I'll say again, thank you, John Hawthorne, for letting me know that the sound was off. I'm going to keep giving you shout outs all the way through this just because for no other reason than screaming into the void wouldn't have been any fun. San Francisco at pick 61. It is in. We'll wait to hear where they go there. But let's go ahead. I wanted to pull up one other thing because we've used and leaned on a number of times. We've leaned on leaned on Draft Buzz. And I want to take a look here over on Draft Buzz to see what was the write-up on Wan'Dale Robinson, excuse me. Let's find out where if this player was a sneaky selection by the New York Football Giants. 2022 wide receivers. Let's dial it up here as we wait to hear on the 49ers selection. We are now just 6 picks away from the New York Football Giants getting on the board in the third round. All right. So we said Mechie was there, Sky Moore was there, Watson. We heard, Austin was there, Austin the third, Bell, who's still out there on the board right now. This is going to be so the guest announcer is coming to the podium right now. Okay, behind Tolbert. There we go. We get down to him. I feel like maybe I took a little glance at him. Over on Draft Buzz, he has decent hands, 82%, but his short receiving is 92. Intermediate route, 96. Deep route, threat, 97. He's not a blocker. Who cares? Let's just skip to the chase on this kid and talk about how they summarized Wan'Dale Moore. I keep saying Wan'Dale Moore. Wan'Dale Robinson is an intriguing prospect in the mold of a dual threat. That's why I got there. Arizona Cardinal, Rondale Moore. He can happily play as a back or a wide receiver, but will be looked at as a playmaking slot player in the pros. He's explosive, fantastic agility and soft hands and surprising strength. However, he is still very inexperienced as a receiver and will be viewed as a little risky to be picked in the first 2 rounds of the 2022 draft. So conviction around a player of some risk. We look at Robinson as a good value in the third round, who will likely be viewed as a nice multi-role player with a chance to become an excellent starting receiver at the next level. So you can slice it however you want. There's some risk there taking him. Obviously, they traded back, they added 2 more assets, and maybe that made them feel comfortable about taking this risk. But when you read inside of this, what I'm reading off of this scouting report is that this is a kid that is going to need to, mold himself into it. But there's real explosiveness here. And you know what? Andy had mentioned saying that he wasn't sure if this felt like, what does this guy do better than what Sky Moore is capable of doing? And this isn't the only thing you look at. You go and you watch tape and you get excited about guys, and I get that. But let's go ahead and just say hands, short, intermediate, and deep threat. Let's take those 4 categories, 82, 92, 96, and 97 on the board. Let's back ourselves out and let's go look at Sky Moore. Like, let's just talk about the raw stat lines and where we think that these guys stack up against one another. Because again, you talk about the marginal difference. They say risk in the second round, real value in the third round. Let's get our hands on Sky Moore here. And let's talk about the fact that he came out and he's a guy. Guess what? You take it for whatever you want. Those top 4 categories I talked about, hand, short receiving, intermediate, and deep threat. Robinson is better in all 4 statistical categories over Sky Moore. So we'll see what Andy has to respond to that when we move ourselves along. We'll throw right back up here. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly, John. And this is, again, all this is personal preference to some extent from team to team and where they see the value. But you go and you watch the tape, and to your point, right, smaller receiver, but all of a sudden you see him in space and you see how he's picking his spots, cutting up field, using himself in different ways. And despite being a little bit undersized, he still is managing to find a way to fight through some tackles and to knock off some guys. And that's what they say with that surprising strength that he offers there. So finally, after a little bit of an intermission there, the 61st pick for the 49ers here in the second round. Drake Jackson, edge rusher out of USC. So mentioned that name earlier in the grouping. Didn't say it was someone that I had my eye on for the New York Football Giants, but we know how San Francisco goes. They want to be an explosive defensive team, so they give themselves some real value there. Let's go ahead and let's keep these back up here. I'm going to do a quick edit on this. Let's take out the time card there and let's go ahead and save that. And let's just keep our names, third round names that we're watching. Chenal, Malone, Tyndall, Chenal and Malone. Chenal and Tyndall. Guys you can think about on the inside, sideline to sideline linebackers. Chenal a little more in that run defense. I look at him, maybe pseudo in the Blake Martinez replacement. Tyndall a little bit more sideline to sideline. And then we've talked about some of those guys as Anderson's come off there, so we know we can't think about him anymore. But Emerson, Woolen, Owazariki, when I see how high he's now listed, 90th on the overall board, I can start to think that that's a real viable option here. And in that regard, if he's there at 81, I take Owazariki. Done. You tell me to take him 67, I'm going to be excited about it. Like, I just, where this value ends up falling will be interesting. Pick is in here for Kansas City, 60 seconds. So just 2 more to go before the second round wraps up. And then we'll dive in on that third round action as well, obviously. But yeah, for me, I just now some of these names that I've been highlighting that that I like, that I had some conviction around, I would not hate hearing their name get called here for the New York Football Giants as we come up to 67. Brian Cook, the safety out of Cincinnati. He's one of the guys that I had on my big board list. We can throw that up here just to remind everybody of what hasn't worked out from my standpoint. So we remember we had Ebikidi. This is second round as well thrown in there. So names that we said, Jones is still out there. Woolen is still there. Pierce gone. Anderson gone. Cook gone. Strange went very early. Other guys that we still have out there to consider, though, would be Jones, Woolen, Cross, Malone, Emerson, Owazariki. And then later, we're talking about at 147, 146, 147. I like a guy like Dontario Drummond. Again, maybe one and done here for the New York Football Giants at the wide receiver spot. But we talked about it when we were discussing the needs chart for the New York Football Giants. Now, Andy and I, kind of maybe scheduled a little bit different. Although he did say Sky Moore early, I was thinking like an Alec Pierce. But when you looked at those players, we started to say, would it be crazy? I think I've talked about it with Mike too, pessimistic Mike. Would it be crazy to sit there and consider one early and then one a little bit later? So they did that first part there at 43, taking Robinson. Would it be crazy to think about them looking at a player like Dontario Drummond on day number 3 tomorrow? Or listen, who knows? The conviction, right? We talk about those convictions here. Um, you have to at least look at, you have to look at it and say there if you like the value of a player, you go get him. I mean, it's simple as that. Going to do a quick secondary project here on the back end. Just keeping an eye out over on Twitter to see if we're getting anything coming in. And I'm just going to zip off the value chart comparing Robinson to Sky Moore. Going to send it over to my co-host Andy Makowitz because I think it's important. I feel like, man, I have to go back and I don't. You get no credit. You get no credit for thinking you may have said something. I didn't have a conviction around Robinson. I remember looking at him. The real question becomes, did I look at him and say, yeah, but maybe not? Okay. So let's continue to look around the board here. Buffalo, the pick is in at 63. We're going to reset the timeline here for the New York Football Giants as well. We're finally closing in on the top of the third round and a chance here for the Giants to really make some hay. Let's just talk about again the top of the draft board here as we'll reset it. And it's I mean, funny not funny, when we reset this draft board, we keep saying the same names every time because they haven't gone anywhere yet. It's still Nakobe Dean. We understand that the quarterbacks are clearly falling. Now, when you talk about best players available, the top out of the top 6, 4 of them are quarterbacks. But it's Nakobe Dean, it's Willis, it's Travis Jones out of UConn, and then it's Ritter, Coral, Howell. And then you get into some other players off the field concerns around Winfrey out of Oklahoma. So some teams are going to push pause on him a little bit. You can still think about a Christian Harris. Maybe he gets there. That was someone that Andy had an eye on. Like him, has the ability to pick up those running backs in coverage as we're just looking through, reminding ourselves of some of the things that he does well. He is probably somebody that could get caught up a little bit on the offensive line, just from what we're reading up here. And again, at 6'1", 226, that's a guy that's going to offer you some things that the Giants haven't had, like coverage ability out of the linebacker spot. But this is why I think you see Nakobe Dean falling, and obviously a player like Christian Harris is a little bit bigger, but I just think that's why you don't see these guys going as soon. Outside linebacker Nick Benito is going to be there, 6'3", 248. Maybe keep an eye out on him. And then we get back into a couple of guys I didn't mention, like Muma. I didn't throw him up there. He'd be certainly one that you would want to consider. Was higher up on the boards here, fell a little bit, but a lot of these names stay the same here. A lot of the picks that are happening here, I mean, guys are going, from lower down the board here. If we go back up and just talk about who's gone recently here as we wait to hear now. Remember, Bills traded down, so they finally come back up. But just as an example, let's take a look at when we take a look at Brian Cook, who just went safety position. He was 105 overall, right? I think we talked about him before. 105 overall. He goes, in the second round, right? So again, I think we just you have to go with value in the players that you like. And to that extent, I'm going to come back around to this thing and tell you, I like Owazariki, if I hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, by the way. James Cook. So back-to-back Cook. James Cook goes to the Buffalo Bills. Boy, talk about a team that wants to get the job done, wants to have some fun. And this is a guy they talked about maybe around 81, 80 to 100 being his range. No, 63. Again, have conviction and go take your player. That's all that matters. I mean, that's why, again, I go back to Robinson and say it doesn't matter where he was listed. It's where you value the player. They're showing the highlights of Cook. We know he can be dynamic. We know he can be explosive. We know he's dual threat runner and receiver out of the backfield, obviously. Has great elusiveness, especially in the backfield when things break down in front of him. I mean, he's a tremendous player. There's nothing not to like about him. In the world where the Giants traded away from Saquon Barkley, I would love seeing the Giants, take a player like this if he had been there at 67, or maybe they moved up to get him. But great player there. So Cook goes off the board here. And again, let's just now running back. This is a little bit different in that regard, because when we talk about running back being a little bit devalued, he was listed as, again, 86th overall on the board. Okay. So that's what we're talking about now. There's a lot of guys being listed out there still on the big board. What you can tell is these guys are sometime at some point the value will be there, but these names don't matter anymore. A lot of those running backs, sure. You talk about a guy, we said Christian Harris. Well, he's 56th overall. So now you're talking about him starting to get away a little bit. Last pick of the second round, the Denver Broncos, that pick is in. We'll see where they go. I'm seeing some other names here. Abraham Lucas, this is right in his range at 60. So everyone else ahead of them, and a lot of them are obviously the quarterbacks. But when you talk about Nakobe Dean and Travis Jones, there's reasons, right? There is a collective consensus inside of the NFL that there are reasons and risks not to take these two particular players when you see where they were ranked coming in, and now that they're still sitting out there on the board. The Denver Broncos will take Nick Bonito. So there you go. I just mentioned his name as a player that could be there potentially. 6'3", 248. Gotta like him. He's a nice player. Good pickup there for the Denver Broncos. Feel like he's the kind of guy that fits, when you talk about. But and that's the kind of, this is the kind of linebacker I like. Listen, it's a rare combination to have 6'3", 248 and be a guy that can get after the quarterback a little bit and also give you some coverage ability on the back end, right? Rare combinations of speed and also strength. That's something that the Giants think they have in Thibodeau, right? It's why you take him as high as you do. As good as he is getting after the quarterback, you want him to be able to be smart, see where the quarterback wants to go, drop back into coverage at times. So nice selection there. 64th overall. That's pretty much on the nose in terms of need, value, and selection. So there you go for Nick Bonito. Finally, Denver Broncos try to get us back on pace here and meet where the board says some of these players should be selected. All right, so we're 3 picks away from the New York Football Giants being back on the clock. As a reminder, we understand where they've gone. We know that obviously it was Wan'Dale Robinson in the second round with a 43rd overall pick after trading down. You see the scroll there. They grab an extra pick at 114. They grab an extra pick at 146. So multiple picks here in the next 3 rounds for the New York Football Giants, which you have to really like. And I'm going to come back to it here. I'm going to come back to Wan'Dale more and tell you, I think that the Giants did a great job getting him here. You go over and look at those measurables as we talk about, and it's not the only thing that matters. Let the eye test tell it to you. And this is, I'll frame it this way. When I watched as the third round kicks off here and the first pick is in with the Jacksonville Jaguars, when I watched Sky Moore, I said, yeah, I get it. I see the things that he can do. I'm neither blown away nor disgusted by what I'm watching on tape, but I didn't think at 36 that would be someone that I would want. Now, does that mean, by the way, that if you took Wan'Dale Moore at 36, would I be surprised? Sure. But I get the skill set. I get the need 100% here, especially when you say he can start by lining up in the slot, which would be taking over for Sterling Shepard there. And it still leaves the door open to go back into those wide receiver waters maybe later in the draft. And that's just me being hopeful, wanting Dontario Drummond to be a New York Football Giant. The pick is in here for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They'll, of course, be under new head coach Doug Peterson. 10-plus losses in 10 of the last 11 seasons. Good Lord. We all know Jacksonville's bad, but I didn't realize it was that bad. Trevor Lawrence, we obviously know, is the quarterback there. A little bit of a break in between rounds here. And then we'll get back into the conversation on what'll be just 2 picks here, and then the New York Football Giants are up. You can tell me that the insane value of Nakobe Dean is now there, or you can tell me there's an incredible reason why he's not being selected. And if he wasn't worth it at, if it wasn't worth it at 43, and you went for a player ranked 80th on the board, there's no reason why you have to jump for Nakobe Dean here. So I'm fine with them looking past him. Quite frankly, I'll adapt, I'll adjust, I'll wrap my head around it. But Nakobe Dean was never the guy for me. I liked Devin Lloyd early in this draft, and then I took that big step back, and I talk about the names that you have in front of you right now. Leo Chenal. We talked about Muma. We got off of him a little bit, but he's still in the mix, certainly. Malone has been the most recent one that I really liked and thought has been a riser coming into this draft class. He'd be right there for the Giants, 70th overall on the board. And then just from a linebacker perspective, I think Channing Tindall. If I was forced to pick between Nakobe Dean and Tindall, I would take Tindall. 6'2", 230. I just like the more the length. Not much bigger. I like a little bit more of the length there. And again, at the same time, tell me you go and get Malone. I'm really excited about that to help bring a little bit more depth from what you're going to have on the outside there, behind Azeez Ojulari and behind Thibodeau. So, and then again, if you want to stay on the interior, I'll even put it this way: I'd rather have Chad Muma or I'd rather have Leo Chenal. You give me either one of those two inside linebackers over Nakobe Dean. So I'm putting a little bit of conviction on that standpoint, saying here's the position, here are the guys on the board. I have two names that I'd rather hear called for the New York Football Giants at inside linebacker. We'll see where the Jaguars go here. We'll wet our whistle and we'll wait for Tony Baselli to announce the Jaguar selection, which will be Luke Fortner, center out of Kentucky. So we had talked about him a bit as being a mid-round prospect for the New York Football Giants. And taking a look down the board here, and then just to round it out now, because the Giants will have a 14 selection gap between 67 and then 81. So anybody that falls inside that range, so I mentioned those linebackers there because we're addressing the Nakobe Dean situation. 81 is Tyreek Woolen. I take him at 67 if I like him. It's almost the same thing with Robinson. If I like him, I take him. I don't bother waiting until 81. And if I go down this list a little bit further here, and we'll wait to see where Luke Fortner was on the board. And by the way, because of how far down Luke Fortner may be, offensive lineman like a Parham, keep him in your mind here for the New York Football Giants too. I said him a number of times. He can certainly be here for the New York Football Giants. After that, the push and pull here is going to be, do the Giants feel like they want to address inside linebacker right here in this moment, or do they want to address cornerback? 66th pick from the Vikings is in, and it's coming fast, so the Giants will be on the board in a moment here. If they do, then you do have a bit of a gap here. You get to an Alex Wright out of UAB, 6'5", 271, listed as an outside linebacker. I mean, that's a man getting his hand in the dirt. Linebacker Brian Asamoah. I had him on my list, quite frankly. I thought he would have already been gone by this point. He's a good player. You got to like him. You got to like his opportunity there. On again, inside linebacker here. Guess what? They passed over 4 other inside linebackers to come down to the 6'2", 226 Oklahoma product. Again, these guys are these are borderline safeties here that we're talking about. It doesn't mean they're not valuable. It doesn't mean they have a skill set and that they don't fit. But I just have there's a different player that I'm looking for there. And I could be fooling myself around what Wink Martindale is going to want in his system. So I'm not trying to, not trying to speak ill of any of these players here. Yeah, Christian Harris, exactly. So I was splitting a little bit of hairs here, John, when we talk about looking at the best available players here. And Andy mentioned Christian Harris as being one of those guys. The pick is immediately in. And they're highlighting that Nakobe Dean has not been taken. The pick is immediately in from the New York Football Giants. So we'll see if that is because they had a very easy, quick conviction around Nakobe Dean. That would be somebody that Andy had talked about. He mentioned Harris as well. Certainly the inside linebacker, a little bit bigger. Let's find out where Big Blue goes here. Amani Toomer up at the podium. Spotted him immediately. No need for the scroll bar. I knew exactly who I was looking at. Hey, Josiah Ezeudu, ladies and gentlemen, this is why you make your predictions. Bring up the big board. There he is, right at the bottom, my friends. I am ecstatic that I managed to pull this one out here. Sorry, we have another too many banners here. Let me get them out the way. I get a big win. Ezeudu on the board. I said I didn't know how high they were going to take him. Didn't know where they were going to look at him, but I came across him late on in the process, and I thought this was a name to certainly watch for the New York Football Giants. I am ecstatic about this pick. I'm going to pull up his card here in a second. We weren't talking about him here again. One thing we're not doing is maybe talking about these players at the right moments of when they could be selected. When we get inside of it, they bypass over a Dylan Parham. Let's go ahead and see if we can find Ezeudu here. He may actually have already been taken just off the overall board now that we have the pick officially in. Okay, let's dial up the player card first here over on the ESPN big board. He was 151. Players are being taken 20 to 30 selections ahead of time. That's what's going on. And inside linebackers are obviously being devalued because there's a lot of them here. Even in spite of Benito getting pulled off the board there, for the most part, you have a number of teams with needs at this position. And you're talking about 2 career sacks allowed for Ezeudu, over 1,019 pass protection snaps. So the New York Football Giants, he started 28 of his 36 career games, so he wasn't a full-time starter there at North Carolina. He is a 6'4", 308-pounder. And by the way, we said about that, dial up that chart, overall football traits. Let me make sure that this background volume isn't too loud because I am ecstatic about this pick. I'm absolutely ecstatic about this pick. I need to do a quick little screenshot here. Need people to know what we're talking about when we are having these discussions here over on the live draft. Going to have to just take care of this real quick before we dive in on it. It is about receipts sometimes, friends. Sometimes we want a little bit of recognition that, hey, we got the job done here. We had a list of names that we believed in, and this is one of them. Gosh darn it, this is one of them. I am just through the roof right now. I really like this kid, and we will certainly break down why here in just a second. Okay. Just need to clean up a little something here. There we go. Save that. All right. Let everybody know yours truly pulled this out. Go ahead and just get into I know this is a little bit of a downtime moment here, and I apologize. We're gonna dive right in on this here in a second, but this was somewhat critical for me. All right. That being the case, let's get ourselves over to the conversation around what this kid brings to the table. Let's get those prospects pulled up here. Let's talk about the offensive line and let's get inside of the guard room. Again, working through it. And some of the way that I ended up coming across Ezeudu was looking at the board and saying, well, if the Giants are addressing offensive line early, and then we think wide receiver, we didn't get it right, but we got the positional value right at the top side of that draft there. All of a sudden, and again, they end up taking him here a little bit earlier, but that just seems to be the way that the board is moving. So these are names I was saying, maybe around, it could be around 112, 147 if a player like this falls there. And in general, I'm going to say the pride that I take in finding a player like this is that the eye test, the measurables, the things that you like about them, when you hear their name get called a lot earlier, you just feel like you did something right. You feel like you got yourself in the right mindset to be in line with what teams are looking for. Take me a second here just to get this offensive line pulled up here. The 68th pick is in from the Cleveland Browns, so we'll see where they go there. But in the meantime, I just need to get myself down this list. I need to find my boy, and I need to give you the official scouting report on who I think is going to be a guy that comes in, a guy that competes, and before long is a guy that's stepping out on the field as a starter for the New York Football Giants. It's why you bring in some veteran players there in the offseason to make sure that you have some safeguards against how the draft board could fall for you. But the hope and dream here is that your veterans are your backups and that you have young players out there starting for you. Okay, we get to him. Here we go. He's got a nice little pair of spectacles on. 6'4", 325, as we said. He's a kid that goes pass run blocking, 79, 81, and overall 78 prospect grade. The Browns pick is in here, so we'll see where they go. Let's just drop down to, again, now listen, this is a guy, they had him listed at 159 overall, but when I read up about the strengths that he has, and I'm hitting bullet points here. I'm reading verbatim for you. Dips his shoulder and moves his feet to get outside leverage when needed, strong and low coming out of his stance, effective in short yardage situations, right? Think about Saquon Barkley in the backfield, getting met 4 yards deep, not having any lanes, not having a few yards to build a head of steam, to read his lanes and make his conviction. We always talk about that choppy footwork from Saquon, trying to find and make something happen. This kid can plug in on the inside and help stabilize that, let alone what it does for Daniel Jones, for the pass protection in there as well. Has a naturally wide base, thickly built, and has good length, long legs to cover a lot of ground with his initial kick and slide. Has a quickness to set up quickly enough and a lateral shuffle to mirror the mobility and get to the second level. Awareness is above average, even though he has limited experience. We talked about just 28 starts over his college career out of 36 games. Sells trap blocks and can turn and seal. He's fluid and getting adjusted to the second level. Think about pulling the guards out, thinking about getting in front of the run game, right? And locking on. We all know the Will Hernandez experience and the old, hey, where is that guard at the second level, providing another layer of space for our running backs to work? He can do it. Plays aggressive, attacks his man, plays with that wide base, right? Solid positional run blocker who flashes the nasty demeanor and killer instinct scouts covet. So there you go. There's weaknesses on this kid. That's fine. I don't care. I absolutely love that the New York Football Giants took this kid. The chart, the where these guys should be going does not mean a damn thing to me anymore. It's just about getting the names selected and putting him in a big blue uniform. You can look at this kid and say, if it's me with where you just took him, that's a borderline second round pick you just made there. I anticipate him starting across this offensive line this season for the New York Football Giants, and I expect him to do it in relatively quick order. Let's go inside that scouting. They talk about the depth chart here for the New York Football Giants. Let's talk about that offensive line. So if it's me here, you have Glowinski from the Colts. We talked about it. Dan and I said, it's nothing great, but at least it's stability. But it didn't mean you had to have a real conviction around him. And then you think on the other side of John Feliciano, you're talking about Shane Lemieux, a fifth-round select into the previous regime who flashed as a rookie, got injured last year. Nothing is guaranteed there. Now, if it's me, you can go ahead and say, plug this kid in behind those two guards in training camp, in preseason, let him go earn that spot. This is that thing we talk about, the risk reward of having so many young players and the growing pains you're going to go through. Guess what? You got to do it. And when you take a look back at what the Giants did over Dave Gettleman's tenure, talking about taking a player, obviously, like Matt Pert in the third round. Now, that didn't work out. So be it, right? I mean, that's just the way that it is. And by the way, he's listed as the backup left tackle now, as opposed to on the right side, even though he's behind the depth chart. Matt Gano over on the right tackle depth chart for whatever that's worth. You got to love that. And this is going to be Nicholas Petit-Free is going to go here from Ohio State, the tackle to the Tennessee Titans at 69. Sorry, I am absolutely buzzing, not just from getting the pick correct, that the Giants should be looking for a player like this and going after him, but I think that there's a real talent here. And this is the kind of stuff, when we talk about it, there's no other way to put it. You have to have a conviction about the selections you make. And we can talk about previous eras and regimes where you take a guy too high and you're not entirely sure if it's good or bad. I just think that this has been a draft where Joe Shane and the Giants clearly had a vision of what they wanted to accomplish. And we can debate about where guys are being listed. They saw the talent that they wanted. They went and got them. Done deal. So have to really like what we're seeing there from that regard. So just a moment here for me to kind of enjoy myself for a second. Chad Muma comes off the board here. The Jacksonville Jaguars, by the way, at pick 70. So there you go. Inside linebacker. Wonder about when some of these guys are going to go. Here's one of those inside linebackers. Shows, again, good speed, good downhill speed. Gets there, disruptive in the run game, obviously. And seems to show a nice job of being able to get off second-level offensive line blocks and then still finish on the ball carrier. So I don't like it. I love it, and I want more of it. Oh, my God. I am just in absolute heaven right now. Woo! Okay, friends. Sorry about that. We're trying to do some real. We want to do the real analysis. We want to feel like we're bringing it to you here. Let's look over at this big board now. The Giants are only 11 picks away from making their second and final selection on day number 2 at pick number 81. Let's think about what they need to do here. I think what you can say, not with certainty, but you probably feel pretty good, I would say, that you're going to be able to push the pause button on any more offensive linemen. You can take one later if you want. There's going to be some names we'll probably end up talking about. But now what you've done is you feel like two veterans mixed in there, or whoever wins out at the other guard position. You want to see this kid, Joshua Ezeudu, get in there and win a starting job. Then you have Thomas. Then you have Neal. You did the thing, in theory, on paper, that the Giants have not been able to do for over a decade. So Chicago's on the clock right now. And just real quick, the other thing we can talk about, overall football traits for this young man out of North Carolina, production is a 2. So it's a 1 to 5, 5 being the worst, 1 being the highest. His production is above average at a 2. His height, weight, speed is a 2, above average. His durability is a 2, above average. His intangibles are right in the middle of it. So just in terms of when you get back here a little bit deeper, you have to feel like he's doing some things well. The offensive guard specific traits, everything is average or above average, including toughness, awareness, things like that. And as we say, if we're just talking about going a little bit deeper on the scouting report on him, a versatile lineman who can play, who has played both tackle and guard. He covers up linebackers in space and has good upside as a zone blocker. Okay, so there you go. That's the report on him. Now let's think forward here to what the New York Football Giants are going to do with the 81st pick here to round out day number 2. And I will be honest with you here. If something breaks after the Giants make their 81st pick, I will, of course, come back in and update it. But if not, I'm going to make that 81st pick, wrap up what they've done so far, set the table up for tomorrow in the remaining 4 through 7 rounds. And then I am getting out of here, friends. I love doing this. I hope everyone enjoys it. We've had up to 15 people at a time. We've had a couple few hundred people were in on it yesterday. I love it. And hopefully this is good for you guys, because I want you to have the experience of being a part of what the Giants are doing here on draft day, and just really why we do the podcast and why we love to talk Giants football, man. This is what it's all about for me. So if we haven't said it enough throughout these, now in almost hour number 3, thank you. I genuinely appreciate everyone that follows, that listens, that interacts with us on any level of social media around the One Giant podcast. It means the world to us. So really, really appreciate that. Resetting the board here, going back overall, the pick is in for Chicago. Wouldn't you know it, Nakobe Dean remains on the board. All of those quarterbacks remain on the board. And then a guy like Christian Harris is still there. Now at this point, though, as we work towards 81, this is where I'm considering who are some of the names. There goes Velus Jones Jr. to Chicago. They have to be happy with that. I mentioned them maybe wanting to get into the wide receiver game here in this draft. You like him. He's not unlike, if you want to say, not unlike a Robinson. Speedy guy, small player, speedy, great in space, good job of fighting off hand and arm tackles, really shifty player. He was a guy that I liked for the Giants as they moved further back here. You could have told me that the Giants took him up at 43 and I wouldn't have batted an eye around it. I think he has that level of upside as well. Or maybe the Giants took him at 67 and then had another opportunity up there. But yeah, really like this kid. So good job by the Chicago Bears. We play the Chicago Bears this year. It's going to be competitive. I'm going to tell you that right now. All right, just communicating with a couple people, a couple of Giants fans around the table here. We'll check in to see if Andy has any follow-ups here as well. Uh, as I do have Andy chiming in with me here. So I'll just communicate with him real quick. I'm just gonna let him know. We're right now. We're having the debate. 81 Chenal. He said Nakobe Dean, Chenal, Harris. What are we thinking here? And I'm telling him, at this point, I got to look past Nakobe Dean right now. There's a reason why he's just tumbling down this board here. There's a reason why Moom went ahead of a Christian Harris as well. So I'm just letting him know. Sorry, lukewarm on him as well. So let's talk about it, though. Let's verbalize this out here. We're talking about Christian Harris being there. If we're saying linebacker, Leo Chenal, we mentioned these guys. Again, tell me D'Angelo Malone is the guy. I'm a big fan of that, and I would take Obviously, Leo Chenal would be my guy here if we're talking linebacker. Beyond that, though, let's just take a step back here and think about it. The other things would be the safety, the cornerback, right? That's the other question that we're asking ourselves here. And you could throw Channing Tindall into the mix, but again, if I'm going to be true to my word, he's 6'2", 230, so he's not exactly any, he's marginally taller than Nakobe Dean. No more proven, obviously, so you have to take that into consideration as well. Tyreek Woolen. I'm just going to tell you, I would love to see. I would love to see Woolen's name get called here for the New York Football Giants if it gets to 81. That would really be a name for me. You could tell me also, Martin Emerson. I know that he's even further down this list, but either one of those guys, I've been pretty high on Emerson for a while. I also like Woolen a lot, and then Awazariki to me. If you want to add him to that defensive front, if you believe in the cornerback room, if you believe in the secondary, then go with a guy up front that's going to help you be disruptive to allow those guys to do their job that much more effectively on the back end. I'm just scanning through some additional players here. Um, Parham is still out there on the board. You know what? I mean, listen, I'll make one bold statement here. What if you went with Parham here out of Memphis? Should he still be there for you at 81? And all of a sudden, all the players that you brought in, these veteran guys, yeah, they're there to be backups and to help teach this young group of players, because you're going to be talking about Andrew Thomas, and you're going to be talking about Parham, and then you're going to be talking. I mean, Parham could even be in the middle there. So maybe it ends up being some combination of Shane Lemieux, and then you have Andrew Thomas. We know that we have Evan Neal. Like, maybe this is the one-stop shop done in the first 3 rounds. The New York Football Giants do rebuild their entire offensive line and really make you feel like they're ready to move forward. So that's not out of the realm of possibility here if the value certainly meets. It's 72nd pick. Seattle's is in here in the 3rd round. We're still 9 picks away from the New York Football Giants being up there on the board. I continue to tell you the players to watch. So all these guys outside of Anderson are still on the board here for the New York Football Giants. So any number of these players, I might move Farrell a little bit further down in this hierarchy. If I was putting them in order, you tend to stay away from the inside linebackers to some extent. Although we saw Muma go there, maybe Chanel and then Malone Woolen. I have Emerson up there, so let's see where fan favorite for Seattle comes up there. One of the Wonder Twins that did battle. Wow, he's got a beautiful one there. Shaquem Griffin is up there with the 5th round. He was a 5th round pick by the Seahawks back in 2018, but he's now up there with the 3rd round pick, 72nd overall, where Seattle will take Abraham Lucas. So there you go, taking a tackle here, right? As we talk about some of these offensive line players. So, Parham, I think that you take a look at where some teams are here coming up. You're probably going to start to get into these conversations where need and then value in the draft is really sitting there. 95th overall is Parham. And when we talk about Lucas, just having to think here, I think he was a little bit higher up. He was up near the top of the best remaining players. I didn't see Lucas there. Let me I'm just trying to see a spot of where Lucas was overall on the board. Let's get into his player card real quick here. Yeah, so he was up there. He was probably among the best remaining players. 60th overall on the board, taken 72nd here. So a little bit of falling value just based on other needs for other teams. Nice pickup there for them. The pick is in immediately for the Indianapolis Colts. They can go on either side of the ball here, really. I mean, they have plenty of needs. They added the wide receiver earlier. So, I mean, I think this is just a strong team looking to get stronger here. So we'll see where they go at pick number 74. They're having an active discussion at the draft around what to expect from this quarterback group, and when is someone going to pull the trigger on one of these guys. Um, Everyone agrees that it didn't work out, right? Oh no. Oh boy. They did a little stunt there for the Colts pick. Someone fell down. It was a joke. He's not injured. Jelani Woods to the Indianapolis Colts. So Andy and I talked about him. We understand the upside of him. Not a guy that I'd be taking this high in the draft. I'll put it that way. You're sitting there at 112, and I maybe feel a little bit differently about it. But for me, um, big listen, he's a big target. He's a big offensive weapon. There's really not much more you need to say about it. I just wouldn't, it wouldn't be something obviously for the New York Football Giants, but you get the value. And again, if you're the Colts, you now have Taylor in the backfield and you added a wide receiver and Pierce, who I was a big fan of. Now you grab another tight end, right? Like, you're talking about adding up a lot of things on the offensive side as they showcase what he's capable of in the pass blocking game too, and the run blocking game. So this is a guy that's capable. If you think that he can do that, as they show, they're now going to have Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, Jelani Woods with Matt Ryan. Yeah, the Colts want to make this happen here, right? Atlanta's pick is in here. Matt Ryan's former team, 74th pick overall. So we'll see where they go here in a moment. Desmond Ritter will finally come off the board. He was, now, if you go back and we talk about it, I was a really big fan of Desmond Ritter, and he finally gets selected here. He's the second quarterback to come off the board. I love this kid. I think he's going to be incredibly successful with Atlanta. He has all the time in the world to develop there, but give him half a season, give him the first season to get his rhythm. Really great kid. I'm excited for him because I was excited for him just as a prospect in general. So finally, a quarterback gets taken here, the 74th pick overall, as we continue to work towards the New York Football Giants. Showing it right now, the development of this kid, like they say, you just got to polish some things off. He said he has the long strides of a Colin Kaepernick in terms of, he's not freakishly quick twitchy, but when he gets out in space, the long strides help him cover a lot of ground in the rushing game, moves some people around with his eyes, manipulates the pocket pretty well. Just enough quickness, just enough pocket quickness, just enough mobility to get some things done. Plus athlete, but certainly not in the vein of a Malik Willis. But this is why I liked this kid. This is why I thought he was worthy of being one of, if not the first quarterbacks off the board. Like we said, when it was going to be, no one's going to be taking the top of the draft. I thought, here's a kid, man. And I thought maybe top of the second round. Here we are sitting in the third. But I'm going to tell you, man, I think Atlanta has their franchise quarterback here going forward. And then that's what you want to accomplish as they show him connecting with some of those players there. Alec Pierce, one of his big receivers, obviously at the college level as well. So let's keep our attention, though, on the New York Football Giants. We are closing in now, less than 10 picks. We're down to 7 away from Big Blue making their final pick of day number 2. We keep coming back to it now. The thing here about Desmond Ritter being taken is that it keeps just another positional value on the board for the New York Football Giants, right? That's all that we're really concerned about is, can the Giants keep value on the board so whatever selection they want to make, they know they're getting a quality prospect. I'll say it again, at this point, I'm out on Nakobe Dean. It doesn't do anything for me here. And honestly, I talked about Travis Jones, but I have to kind of be out on him a little bit too. This is a prospect that's falling here. You wonder about one of the things that they did say, doesn't play fast all the time, and sometimes can just kind of stall out as far as just getting caught up in it and not being able to fight off the blocks, not always being able to impact the play. So that matters when you're evaluating these players, especially when we get into key picks here for the Giants like this. Does Christian Harris keep his name up in there? Maybe. At this point right now, I'd be leaning towards Leo Chenal, if you want to go inside, D'Angelo Malone, if you want to go outside. And then again, I keep coming back to Tariq Woolen. Again, press zone corner, rare blend of size, length, and speed, has long arms, the burst to recover when he gets caught out. He moved from receiver to corner in late 2019, and he's still learning the position, but he reads the quarterback and flashes good route recognition. That's it, man. They talk about inconsistent finisher and fails to wrap up at times, but he gets off blocks and has good stopping power and run support. I'm just talking about a dude that is 6'4", 205. Put him on the outside, get him in that man coverage, let him go on and take up those big bodied receivers out there and play across from Adoree Jackson. Texans are on the board here, 75th pick. It is in. Christian Harris comes off the board here. So I'm going to tell you right now, that makes me happy. I'm happy to see Christian Harris come off the board. He's not my guy. So I prefer him not be there for the New York Football Giants. So Houston, they've taken the cornerback here. Now they add a linebacker. Can't remember. I'm trying to think in between there who they got in the in between, but they're adding. Listen, we talk about them. They lucked in maybe with Mills and feeling like they got their franchise quarterback a little bit later in the draft, and now they're just trying to add pieces and build. It's a resetting for that franchise in a lot of ways. So they get Christian Harris. Good for him. As they say, they're highlighting some things like a 52 PFF coverage grade in 2021. That's, not that PFF is the end all be all, but it's a little bit concerning when you see things like that. You take a player, you want to feel like he can impact it at a lot of different levels. I think John was saying in the comments that, versatile player. Yeah. Yeah. Versatile linebacker, 100%, John. But I just take obstacles out of my way. Now, somebody could take Nakobe Dean here just to make sure he's not on the board as well. We have Baltimore, Indy will be back up, Cleveland, Chargers, Denver, and then it will be Big Blue, and already the pick is in for the Baltimore Ravens. So we'll see where they go. And just a footnote, remember that trade that happened. The Cardinals are going to exercise the fifth-year option, on Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, they acquired in that trade. That was very upsetting for Lamar Jackson. All right, so back in on the board, man, and this is why it feels good when you have these names up here and you just feel like some of them are still there for you. Um, as we say, Strange is gone now, Pierce is gone now, Anderson is gone now, Ebikidi is gone. So one of them is gone in Ezeudu because we took him, which you love to see. But now we're walking through this now. We've lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the safety Cook, and then 6 with our selection in Ezeudu. So these are some of the names that we were talking about. This is beyond just day 2 here. When you think about a guy like Drummond, although again, 112, yeah, I'd take him there if it's me. But here at 81, obviously, you're looking for value and you're looking to fill a key need if you can. So I said it before. Woolen just feels like a really strong pick here for me. If he's available, I would love to see the Giants take him. And then you got a guy like Chenal there waiting for you if you want to go inside linebacker, like somebody with a little bit more meat, help in the run defense. And then sleeper pick here is obviously Owazariki. Really like him as well. And, between Chenal and Owazariki, the case that I'm making here is get better in run defense too, right? That's not a guarantee. We know Blake Martinez injured last year, coming back from that, but you don't have a lot of guys that give you that run support. Decimated the nose tackle position. Dalvin Tomlinson gone. BJ Hill gone. Austin Johnson gone, right? So, how are you going to address that? You can put a guy of average ability there at the nose tackle position and then add some real run defense beef in behind them with the weight and size of a Leo Chenal, or you can go with somebody that piles right up in front of them and starts to occupy bodies, whether it's a Wazariki over the nose or kicking Dexter Lawrence back inside at 342 pounds. Let him go to work here. So pick is in at 76 for the Baltimore Ravens. That's now where we're standing here, though. In terms of my board right now, it just feels like you added an extra offensive lineman there that we absolutely love. You've added a weapon offensively. You've already added one defensive piece. Let's try to dial ourselves back in here and beef up the interior of that defense and make sure that we're giving Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari a real chance to have success here right out the gate. Year number 2, obviously, for Ojulari, rookie campaign for Thibodeau. Let's make it so that these guys can really put some pressure on the quarterback. Oh, this is a pressure cooker right now. I am right in the thick of it. Richard Sherman asking on the NFL Network broadcast, why is Malik Willis falling? Yeah, listen, but again, I don't think it's unreasonable to sit here and say, hey, you're talking about a quarterback that played at a smaller school. He's a little bit undersized. There's tremendous upside to this kid. But it's a little bit different than when a player like Lamar Jackson came out. Did he fall? Yes, but he's still taken high enough because he played at a high enough profile school. I probably assume that when you go back inside of it, you're just saying the competition level. Can we assess enough on tape here, or even just is the development going to be that much longer where you have to really wait? I'll tell you this though, I would prefer at this point, from a narrative standpoint, you would really prefer for Malik Willis to go somewhere that he's going to be able to start immediately. And the reason why I say that is because if you get a chance for him to go somewhere where he can compete and maybe take over, then it's just a dream within a dream. I mean, for that team as well, by the way, you get a guy in an absolute sweetheart of a deal, and you also, put yourself in a spot just to have a Malik Willis proving everybody wrong. So I would love, to see him go somewhere, no established veteran quarterback that's a couple years away, potentially from, getting out of the way and letting Malik take over. Travis Jones. So finally he comes off the board. And guess what? When the Baltimore Ravens draft a defensive player, you assume that he's going to be great. So as I said, maybe he was falling a little bit there, some of the inconsistencies, but he's a big boy. You put him in the middle of it. I talked about that's a guy you could have plugged in there along that line as well. They're showing him at the Senior Bowl week, just really playing with some of that nastiness, playing with some of that edge, just absolutely clubbing a center out of the way with ease and getting after the quarterback there. So talked about him enough to know that we obviously liked him here coming into this draft. We'll see what happens next. Anyone out of these here, my short list that I listed moments ago was Chanel Malone, Tyndall, Woolen, Wazariki, Parham, Emerson, Farrell Jr. Farrell Jr. is probably on the back end of it. Emerson maybe is a little bit further back, but again, Emerson or Woolen here, I would really love. Quick pick in from the Colts as well here. I'm gonna take a little brief 1 minute step away here. Everybody hang in here with us. We're only another 3 picks away from finding out where the Giants go here. Back in 1 second to continue to round out this draft coverage here as Bernard Rahman, the Central Michigan tackle, goes to the Colts. That's a nice one. Obviously converted over from tight end to the position, put on a lot of weight really quickly, still plays pretty lean, but you can see this kid really developing nicely. Fell because of the lack of experience. Great pick from the Colts. They're having one heck of a draft for themselves. Back in 30 seconds to keep our coverage going. Okay. Cleveland is in. We're going to do just a little bit of an adjustment here if we can, real quick. Let's go ahead and break it down, friends. Oh, let's just relax for a second here. Get the mic off the stand. Oh, that's it right there. We should all be able to relax just a little bit at the end of the draft. At the end of the day, number 2. We're back in tomorrow, right at noon, rounds 4 through 7. I mean, obviously, listen, the coverage starts at 7 o'clock tonight. This was just rounds 2 and 3. 4 through 7 work a little bit quicker, but anticipate being around for at least a couple of hours on that one as well. And now, obviously, knowing that the New York Football Giants are going to have picks at 112 and 114, and then again at 146 and 147, and then again at 173 and 182, right? So there's just so much value there. 3 fifth-round picks to go along with their 2 fourth-rounders, 6th-rounder there to close things out. So really excited about getting into that coverage there. And when you know you're going to be giving yourself potentially, we'll see if there's any movement, but as it stands right now, another 6 selections coming their way. Alex Wright, defensive end at a UAB. So I mentioned him before there when we were talking about edge talents. They listed him as an edge rusher on the big board, but at 6'5", 271, you get why he's a player that puts his hand in the dirt probably and really gets after it here. You know, again, you think about how big Leonard Williams is. Again, you know, hard to do it in the 3-4 system. This is a really nice 4-3 kind of player when you think about putting 2 really strong defensive tackles in there. And then you have this guy kind of bookend there in that 4-3 system, give you a great opportunity to get it after pass rusher. So I like that pick for Cleveland, adding more depth for themselves. Just 3 picks away from Big Blue here. And again, nothing coming off the board here in terms of big names that the Giants may want. Let's get into the comment section here. I'm here for it. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. How do you pronounce your first or that first part of that? I'm gonna say Steve. I'm gonna go with Steve. I really appreciate that. As I say, we said it before. You know, it's up here on the ticker here somewhere along the ways. We like to have it up. That's where you can find us, man. At One Giant Podcast over on Twitter. Give me a follow if you're a fan of the Giants. If you're a fan of the Brooklyn Nets, cover them over on the Locked On Nets podcast with Doug Norrie. We've been doing that for going on 3 plus 4, almost 4 seasons now over there. We're in our 3rd season of covering the New York Football Giants. As you can tell, we've been doing a lot of this on YouTube more recently in this off season. It's only going to get more. We're going to try to do it more consistently for everybody. So we really appreciate the support. We love doing it, man. So there's also some expansion going on the YouTube side of things. Going to branch out to the New York Yankees as well. Going to try to cover the NHL a little bit. So we're in some conversations right now with some people that I worked with over on the Locked On podcast network. Some people that I worked with going back to Sportscaster, live streaming, talking a lot of sports league wide conversations there. So we're hoping to have a few different things that we're going to dial up here. And the goal is to bring some of you along for the ride and have a lot of fun and have some good conversations in and around our favorite teams. I mean, that's the deal. That's what it's all about. And hopefully that comes across that way because you can cover and talk sports in a lot of different ways. The way that I like to do it is try to be informed, try to have insightful commentary around things, and then also have a whole bunch of fun. So again, Steve, genuinely appreciate that. And anyone that's given some kind words or anyone that's watched over the last couple of days means the world to me. Share it with someone that you like and let them know. Turn them on to what we're doing here. So beyond this, just to give you that general sense before we get in here, only a couple picks away now, as we say, from the Giants at 81. But we're going to wrap this up coming in on, we may try to get something out tomorrow on the podcast side of things. It'll just be a concise breakdown. Pick number 5, pick number 7, pick number 43, talking about trading down and getting more assets, and then pick number 67, and then number 81. I don't know if we'll compartmentalize them by round or by player, but there'll be a lot of quick hit bonus podcast episodes that should give some real clarity about the player, the value, the fit, and how it impacts the current roster. So we're going to fire those out there for you. Probably try to drop them over here on YouTube as well if we can. So you can look forward to that. And then on Monday, it'll really be the global perspective around, around what this team can accomplish here heading into the offseason, right? Because we said needs, just holes all over this roster. When you make a trade down like the Giants did, and you had two obviously quality picks at the top, suddenly you can look across this roster and really feel like you are starting to plug in some needs that you had there. So, we'll have to find out how competitive can they be. Town. Okay, gotcha. Oh, okay, gotcha. Fuquay. Fuquay Steve. I like it. Now I can call you by your full name instead of just saying Steve. Well, again, I really appreciate it, man. The support means everything. So pick number 79 is in here for the Chargers. Andy mentioned this yesterday when we were covering it. So much of the Chargers was like, well, what do they need? I mean, not in a bad way. It's just like whatever they add here, you're gonna be like, that sounds good, right? Just more for them. And this really does come into, I think, for the young quarterback there. This is about you don't have a lot of time here to eliminate any doubt, right? You cannot be struggling along the way here because it's too strong of a team. It's a very competitive AFC, but they have expectations here. And when you feel like you kind of luck out and get to take advantage of being up on a young rookie quarterback deal, you can have high cost free agents, and then you can also add it in the draft here. So big expectations for what they add here in this draft, and then what it looks like for them going forward. JT Woods, safety out of Baylor. So safety comes off the board. Not one of the guys that I had my eye on. Did take a look at him, but I didn't see him necessarily as one of the players that I was really excited about for the Giants to consider. Doesn't mean that he's not good though. Doesn't mean just because you don't wear just because you're not a big blue giant does not mean that he's not a quality player here. But we can just highlight as we talk about where's the overall big board stand now. Let's go ahead and just reset it here because a couple of guys came off. Oh, blink of an eye. I fell behind here. My boy, Martin Emerson, came off the board from Mississippi State, not paying attention. Oh, Martin Emerson comes off the board there at right after us, after Ezeudu went off. Too much excitement. Not watching the board. Emerson gone. Can't look for him here at 81. So that's a quality pick for Cleveland. I'm absolutely beside myself there. We saw that Muma went. And then in behind it, it was Lucas went to Seattle there. We saw that. We saw Woods. We saw Ritter. We saw Harris. We saw Jones there. So we didn't miss anything else out there. I just cannot believe blink of an eye. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's just a brutal beat for me. So no more. So now I have to turn my attention. I said Martin Emerson was a player, a prospect that I thought could have gone a lot higher. They said top of the second round if they were ready to pull the trigger on a player that was going to play safety. Ends up falling a little bit. Really a nice pickup there, though, for the Cleveland Browns. I am absolutely disgusted. Greg Dulcich, tight end, goes off the board to the Denver Broncos. So, okay, so they go ahead and get themselves another quality player for the offensive side of the ball there. We'll see how things shape up for the Denver Broncos, obviously, with Russell Wilson. So another weapon for Russell Wilson as he'll make his debut for the Broncos when the season kicks off. Oh, my God, I'm so angry. I am so Got to put the mic down. Got to put the mic down. I am so angry right there. All right. So, if you just jumped into here, I'm so angry because when we talk about that big board that we had mentioned before, now another name that's off there is going to be Emerson Emerson out of Mississippi State. Excuse me. Martin Emerson out of Mississippi State, the long, big cornerback, recruited as a safety, played at cornerback, thought maybe he could be one or the other coming into the pro level, so fell a little bit. The pick is immediately in for the New York Football Giants. Let's just listen. You know what we're after here? We're after quality. All we want is a quality player that the Giants can get after. Parham is sitting out there. You can improve the offensive line if that's the way that you want to go. Linebackers are still available here, obviously, too. Troy Vincent is making the selection. Cor'Dale Flott. Okay, so I mentioned him, cornerback. All right, so here you go. We don't go with Tyreek Woolen, but we do go with a cornerback. Let's go ahead and get our eyes on him. We mentioned, so you knew they had to bring somebody up here, right? He's out of LSU. Oh, I had to close out the tab that says Tariq Woolen, who was the best available or is now the best available cornerback on the board after Flott goes. Let's take a look at the player card. He was 85th overall on the board, so you're right in the wheelhouse of where you want to be. Kid comes in at 6 foot and a half, buck 75. Why did I look past him? Because he is not the biggest player in the world. Gonna listen in here a little bit. So they're talking about Cor'Dale Flott going into the nickel, playing in the slot. Makes a lot of sense based on his size. The cornerback specific traits. He's a 3 across the board, average in all of the instincts recognition, cover skills, ball skills. He's above average in run support. So you like him in and around the line of scrimmage. Little surprising. I mean, and maybe I could be I can maybe it should not be as surprising as I'm making it out to be, just from the standpoint of if we're going to go over and look at if we're going to go over and look at the Giants and their depth chart room here, you start to say at that cornerback position, while obviously we don't anticipate necessarily James Bradbury being there long term, this is where you're going to say you believe in a player, whether you can say it's going to be Rodarius Williams, you can tell me it's going to be Aaron Robinson, right? You have to believe in one of these two guys as being capable of going on the outside. 6 foot 193 for Williams. I don't consider him to necessarily be the outside guy you want to go for, but again, just 6 foot 193 for Robinson. So the sum of the parts is what I would say here with this selection here. I personally, as D'Angelo Malone goes off the board to Atlanta, I'm going to put Atlanta down as being a team that really did a great job for themselves in this draft class. Remember, Adoree Jackson's only 5'11", playing at a buck 85. So the approach here with that selection is saying we believe that collectively, this secondary is going to be fast. It's going to be versatile. You're going to be able to probably switch your schemes. Maybe you don't have to necessarily say follow your assignment from sideline to sideline. You can just go ahead and drop off the coverage. That's going to be the approach in Wink Martindale's system. In that regard, you can say that it makes a lot of sense because the Giants weren't going to solve it in one move here, right? If it had been Gardner at the top of the draft, certainly, but instead they're going to try to probably do it collectively. Wink Martindale is a versatile system. He wants guys that can do a lot of different things. I like, don't love this here. We'll see how he pans out. So just to put a bow on it, obviously we didn't get, man, Tariq Woolen just feels like that would have been a knock right out of the ballpark there. I would have absolutely just been ecstatic about that selection there. It's not the end of the world. We can still feel like they can do some really good things here. So day number 2 wraps up. Some big movement for the New York Football Giants. They come up with a 36 pick overall. They make a small trade back with the Jets. They pick up a 5th round pick. They make another trade back to 43 with the Atlanta Falcons, at which point they grab themselves another 4th round pick. So they'll now have 2 picks in the 4th round. They'll have 3 picks in the 5th round, and they'll still have their final 6th round pick in tomorrow, rounds 4 through 7. That'll come off the board there. Go ahead and just hit up these right here real quick. And that's what, yeah. So that's what you were looking for there, Basie. Um, so the Giants end up picking up extra assets. We did talk about that too coming into it. Top of the 2nd round, if you're talking about getting more, that's a marginal move you could make. I said about like moving back to Seattle at 40 and then still being able to look at those cornerback rooms. Instead, as we know, they make the big play. They bring in another offensive lineman, somebody that we feel pretty darn good about for the New York Football Giants. And they end up walking away on day number 2 after taking Evan Neal and Thibodeau in the 1st round. They go with Wan'Dale Robinson at the 43rd pick. The more you read about him, the more you can get excited about him. I like it. I like the conviction. More conviction when you talk about Joshua Ezeudu there out of North Carolina. Add him in to the offensive line group. And then Cor'Dale Flott, 6 foot. Well, okay, let's give credit where it's due, though. He is 6'1". So they're giving him that full 1 inch there and 175. They continue to get pretty long there. Going to be the tallest cornerback that they currently have on the roster. His overall rank was 85th. So he's right there where you want him to be. And just before we get out the door, as we've done with most of our draft picks today, let's go ahead and just look inside where they had him. We've been using Draft Buzz. We like the way that they frame these prospects. They make it a pretty clean look at what they're capable of doing. Let's dive in on that. We'll wrap up our coverage. And as I said, right back here, we'll come in 15 minutes ahead of the noon start, reset the table where the Giants are, reset the picks. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants had to move with all of those assets they do have there. And I'm going to keep my eye on it here. If you're on YouTube, if you're around, I'll jump right back in live if the Giants come back up in this draft class here to make another play inside of the third round. But just quickly here before we close out, let's get our eyes on this young cornerback out of LSU for the New York Football Giants. There is our boy. I regard him as maybe being a little bit too small, but that's okay. Listed over, by the way, on Draft Buzz at 165, gets listed here at 175. So we can feel like, if he puts on a little bit of mass there, you can feel better about that. Tackling, he's above average there, 73%. Good run defender, as I said. Also is good in coverage, 82. 81 in man press, 77 in zone. So pretty balanced. And again, as we say, if you're in Wink Martindale's system, be versatile. The Philadelphia Eagles take Nakobe Dean. So he finally comes off the board here. The 19th overall on the big board finally comes off. So we'll get a good look. We'll get a good look at this kid as we'll see him 2 times a year going forward. Final scouting report here for Flott would be a coordinated athlete with good footwork and balance, a heady cover player with above average feel and anticipation in space, has good instincts and anticipation and reacts with discipline, dangerous with the ball in his hands. So thinking about getting some turnovers and really maximizing them, trusts his eyes with very good awareness, very good reaction skills to break quickly on the ball, savvy cover skills to recognize and anticipate routes, understands what's coming and has good ball skills, aware zone quarterback who also is adept in man coverage, flashing physical hand punch at the line and straight line speed to stay with receivers downfield. You have to like that. You have to like the collection of attributes they're saying. We will talk about the weaknesses here just because he's a little bit smaller, but he fails to maintain inside technique in man coverage. He's not a press corner. He struggles to break down in space and can be a liability against the run and will slip off tackles and needs to finish more consistently. So that's what you get when he's a little bit smaller. The upside, though, is everything you talk about. Sounds like he's a high football IQ player, someone you're going to be able to rely on with consistency to step out on the field and give you quality reps if it's going to be in the nickel, in the slot. And while we know a lot of man press coverage in Wink Martindale's system, when you want to get versatile and have some of these guys work in space, it sounds like he can be a real asset for you there in that regard. So we'll dive deeper in on him. We'll keep talking about him. And let's see here. My grade for day 2 is a B. It's coming in from Basie. I really liked the trade backs getting more capital, but I feel they could have picked better. But could pick better players at these positions. Yeah, listen. I'm going to tell you right now, as I said at the top, Wan'Dale Robinson wasn't on my board, but if you liked Sky Moore, then you should love Wan'Dale Robinson. If you would have been excited for them to take Sky Moore there, you should be very excited that they took Wan'Dale Robinson. And we'll dive in on that deeper as we get out of this draft class. Again, talk about the offensive lineman, the guard. I really like him a lot. So I think they got an incredible value there. To your point, you make the little trade down. You could have stayed there, could have gone after any particular player that you wanted. When I see Martin Emerson go just behind us there at the 68th pick, it does give me pause. If I was picking between the two, I'm going with Martin Emerson there, and then I'm thinking about an offensive lineman somewhere else. So that one stings a little bit. But again, we're going to evaluate these things as they unfold. I probably, in my heart of hearts, then seeing them take Flott with the pick at 81, I'm going to need, when we talk about one last time, this board of players that we've talked about here, I'm going to need Ezeudu to be a starter this year. Like that's what needs to happen for me to feel really good about that pick, as opposed to thinking about what Martin Emerson could be for this team, where I think he could be playing on the outside. He can give you some safety depth as well, versatility and a complement to a guy like Xavier McKinney. So I hear you. Listen, let's get through it, right? Let's see what happens here on day number 3, rounds 4 through 7, and then we'll really start to break down where we think this team is overall. A lot of pieces still to add here. I'm going to update what my board looks like because as it stands right now, we know a lot of these guys are gone. Malone's gone. Pierce is gone. Anderson. Ebikidi, and Jones, Strange, Cook, Emerson, right? We got our boy there. There's a few names left here. Let's update this board and roll it over. Can still talk about Tyreek Woolen being out there. I'm going to make sure that he is still on that board there because I don't care. You took the inside guy. I'm also going to tell you this. The fact that they were willing to take a guy at the nickel slot position means that they don't have any conviction about the secondary as a whole right now, because you would think the bigger area, the first thing you would do would be to go on the outside there. So if we just, I'll come back in here real quick before we get out the door and keep an eye on here as the 85th pick is in for the New England Patriots. But back this up here real fast. You can tell by the lack of saliva that it's time to go. Donny Osmond is announcing for the Patriots, in case anyone was wondering. He just violently yelled at the screen when he came up there. So Marcus Jones goes here to the Patriots. Small player, 5'8", right? We talk about him. Great special teams upside as well. You can use him in a lot of different ways. Could even give you some offensive upside too. So a lot to like there for sure. Let me just redial this up here real fast. Okay. One last time here up on DraftCast. Malik Willis, by the way, still sitting out there right now. And I'm guessing Woolen went somewhere in behind while I was having a conversation with you all about who we took and what it looks like for this team. Let's see. Did we lose him? Malone went there right after us with Flott. It looks like we still have Tyreek Woolen on the board. Again, are they going to double down? Leo Chenal is still on the board here. Long way to go to 112, right? So while Woolen is still out there, he's sitting as the 13th best player. So maybe some linebackers come through there. Maybe Parham continues to sit on the board. But as we think back like a little bit deeper here, this is where I would really love, I've mentioned his name now a number of times there. And I should just do a double. Let's do a double check here because things are happening kind of fast as we come off the top of this board. Um, Wazariki is still there out of Iowa. I like him a lot. We're going to start really, let's start thinking about inside linebacker, obviously. So there's some things there to consider. Maybe tight end starts to become in play potentially, depending on who could fall. We talked about Cade Otton, talk about Isaiah Likely out of Coastal Carolina. I was big on him as we worked through some of the prospect grades, 6'5", 245. So there's some players here. Not to mention, to say nothing about Darian Kennard, offensive guard out of Kentucky. Maybe, again, do you try to finish off this offensive line play? Had Neil Farrell up on my board as well. So there's some names here, and then you can wait, and we can talk about those safeties that we've mentioned before. Certainly, there's going to be some real value there on the back end. And there you go. Another guy is DeMarco Jackson out of Appalachian State. That's a later round pick, 136 on the board. Don't know how high you might take him, but he's a guy that I've had my eye on as well. So we'll get into this board here. There's Cade Otton. He's a ways down there. He's sitting 146 overall. If you have conviction, you go get these guys. Tyson Anderson is still there, the safety out of Toledo. That's another name that you can keep in mind. Leon O'Neal Jr., safety out of Texas A&M. So we'll come back in. We'll have a clearer board here for us tomorrow when we talk about rounds 4 through 7, and we'll see who else comes off of here, because obviously we're at pick 86 right now. We still got to get through 90. We're going to have to get all the way up to 96 plus some compensatory picks as well that will start to kick in. So a little bit of work to do, and some names are certainly going to come off the board here before the Giants get back up there. We'll find out. We'll keep an eye on it, and we'll be back again tomorrow. So as I say, keep following us here on YouTube. If you like the content, subscribe to the channel, share it with somebody, follow us over on Twitter, get the podcast wherever you get those needs fulfilled. We'll be right back in tomorrow, covering the third day of the draft, resetting what the Giants accomplished and where we think they can go. Still some really great names out there on the board. I gave the first round grade an A. I think that there's little things you might consider about, could you have traded back? Doesn't mean you could have, but that might have been the best version of the top of the draft. But a nice A up there. You address two big areas of need. This one, I think I'm a little bit in line there with that B grade that you threw out, because there's some unknowns, there's some variables here, and I might have flip-flopped a couple of decisions, but ultimately got to get through another 6 picks, right? Another 6 picks for the Giants here. 2 in the 4th, 3 in the 5th, and 1 in the 6th tomorrow. So a lot of work yet to be done. Thanks again for watching. Appreciate everyone as always. And if Andy Makowitz were here, he would, of course, want, need, and nay, demand the people know. As always, let's go Big Blue.